No, yo, no, yo, no, 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 ஆதிமூலநாத ஜோதி ஓதும் ஓதும் ஜீவபோதி ஈடில்லாத ஞான சேதி ஊன்றி வாசினேசி பூசி நாதவிந்து கலாதி நமோ நம 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 நாதவிந்து கலாதி நமோ நம.
Your Dream Visions Part 2. I am going to read slowly so you have time to better understand what is being said. I am going to go over a lot of information as I proceed along, and also give a lot of examples. I know at times, it will be hard for you as the reader to keep up, but eventually you will catch on to where it is I am coming from. You must understand, even if it is just a little bit, that you are now exploring so many more worlds and universes, which will be opening up to you, so have fun with this. A real-time experience I just had with REALSIDE, and we can call it a dream vision, is one of the many fun ones that can occur in anyone's life. This was during an afternoon nap after I came back in from surfing, and I went to write on the computer for a while. Then I went online to a website to look at one of the cars I would be purchasing. The car I want is the Lexus is convertible. After looking over the Lexus website and choosing the car I wanted, which I have done many times before, I went and laid down. I suddenly became aware that I was in a convertible Lexus with REALSIDE as he was driving. Then, we suddenly pulled up to the Lexus dealer. REALSIDE got out of the car and went inside the showroom in front of me. When I entered and went to sit with him, he was already telling a salesman about the car I wanted and the terms. In this real-time experience, REALSIDE, who acts as the dad, was already making the deal for me, which would soon show up in the physical. As I sat and listened, I could see that the salesman was a bit reluctant with the terms, because these guys only like to listen to themselves, as was being demonstrated by the fact that he had on a sweatshirt with a hood on it, where only the front of his face was showing, as his head and ears were covered. In other words, he was sitting there smiling, but was not that interested in listening to us, as we were the ones buying the car. Your dream visions, for the most part, will always demonstrate something to the dreamer, because even though this is the whole of life providing this gift, it also respects the fact of the free will of the individual to make their own choices, whether they are good for the dreamer or not, so it is best to pay attention the best one can, and thoroughly look over what is taking place. I also have friends, who act like advisors with me, as I do the same for them, and we share our real-time experiences with each other to get as many different views about what is taking place. because my only purpose is to provide something wonderful and real for this level, and all the levels and positions in life. I am shown what most people will never know. Here is where a person's real intent shows up within their own dream visions, as they usually do not recognize it for the longest time, if ever. I will suggest only sharing one's dream visions with those who can be trusted, especially emotionally, because the human part of people has many ways of being immature to the point of being intrusive, rude and bothersome. A person's dream vision are very important and very personal. I have led my life following the real guidance I am shown. While I have seen almost all the people I have tried to work with use their literal self-thinking in their own mind, they know what they are doing, because they are the educated adult. Of course, there are many positions on the physical level that pertain to what is taking place here, but for a definite overview of any person or situation, the real guides provide the best overview in your dreams. Life itself and the real guides will provide many attempts in many different ways to show a person what can work out better for them in the long run, but we have to constantly pay attention and want to listen and learn. The biggest barrier for anyone is their own personal conditioned realms. Anything we have created can become an asset once we understand how it all fits into the big picture as merely one of the many pieces, and not trying to make one of the little pieces bigger than it is. On the earth at this time, there are a lot of personality icons, from business people, to religious and political speech makers, to the earthly spiritual arena of masters and gurus. All of what is being demonstrated and created is fine, as it is all part of a huge wake-up call for the real you. But of course, the overly developed personal self usually does not recognize this true fact, as it has its own defined agenda and usually blots out any real guidance that tries to get into its designed consciousness. And so, for those who are sincere with discovering real truth, they should take the time to first read the Adventurous series, then become a new supporter with a new wave, so they can become free during this lifetime. There are many types of what has been termed as dreams. First is the passing dream, which is what has been more than mistakenly thought of as reality, and actually the only reality there is to even be considered, so say many, who are only one-dimensional and unaware of their real awareness. Of course, the belief systems profess there to be a heaven somewhere, which all the good people will go to, while the bad people will go to the designated hell, which is descriptive and seems to be provided by the very same systems, as they have more than proven this by what they have already done on the earth from all their historic takeovers. So, with what is taking place on earth, which according to the authoritarians who rule this planet, there just doesn't seem to be any life anywhere else in all of deep dark space. For those who want to stay with these little notions, and a whole lot more that have been dreamt up, it is their right to do so. But for those who want to have the best lifestyle, of exploring and taking on the real adventure of life, then keep reading, there will always be more. This life on earth, and the many all of us have lived before, whether here or somewhere else, is all part of the passing dream. I would say that by simply paying attention to what is happening here with the so-called time factor and the constant aging of the bodies, that everything here passes and eventually disappears. And so, if this is supposed to be the actual reality, then what about your dream visions and also the described heaven that is in so many doctrines on this earth? If a person wants to accept what they have read, or heard from others who profess to know, that can be fine, but for myself I want to find out firsthand what is really going on. The whole of life is nowhere to be found except with each of us already. I would say that it is a good idea to get as much knowledge from many different sources as a comparison to the true reality itself. So, this becomes a huge journey like nothing else. When we become very patient and learn to live now, and identify with what is termed as past, present and future, we can eventually see the subtitles of the creative actions, which are constantly occurring with this place in life. Once a person has accepted the real guidance from the real guides, then they are starting their own journey to real freedom, and are provided with so much more than any educational system on the earth can ever teach. For me, I like the mystery and adventure of being surprised with what life will show me, because it is always new and always now. The true purpose of the passing dream is a process for the real you to become more aware of where you are now and what else is possible, besides just being unconscious to the whole of life. Of course, to the overly conditioned personal self, what I am referring to does not at all make sense. So when one comes across this knowledge of possibly other worlds and dimensions, they usually scoff it off right away. And if they continue to do so, then they become fossilized into their matrixed mind, and no longer have any free will of their own, but must continue to live out the effects of the dictates of their limited senses, causes, and primitive understanding of what they have come to believe is all their life and life itself can be. If we are to properly examine what I am referring to here, we would need a very powerful microscope to even detect the existence of what seems so grand from the one-dimensional area of most humans. Compared to the whole of life, the all is, what is taking place here is so unbelievably minute, that it has its place, as not really existing at all. But of course, each one of us must first learn to identify the limitedness of being in a physical body, along with the 4 other unseen bodies each of us carries. Our experiences here are neither good or bad, but simply necessary to discover your real awareness. Because the literal mind seems to rule in this dimension, what I am constantly referring to will perplex most people for the longest time, because they have not recognized any real experience with their life. All of us do have constant ongoing experiences, but for the most part, not in conjunction with and comparative with the true reality, but only according to all the agreements that have been manufactured from the literal senses, such as reason and logic, and the standards of morality, as it applies to the social orders. So, for anyone to take a leap from their grounded and set into stone training and conditioning, really does take a lot for one to start to move beyond what seems to make so much more sense while they are on Earth. So, this is why I have provided the new sessions as a start for anyone to begin to have real experiences with the real guides in their dream visions. This then adds many dimensions to a person's life that have not been seen before. By the very fact of one wanting to explore the vast unknown, and you doors start opening up for them, which show up in your dream visions. This also goes for people who do not dream. The next type of dream, which Paul Twitchell referred to as a simple dream, as this type substitutes an elusive action, an action the body may be demanding at the time the person is dreaming. It might be thirst, pain, or possibly an outside disturbance like an alarm clock or a noise from the street. The mind wants to continue to sleep, but it is the body that is reacting to the influence. Or, the body may want to rest, but the mind cannot be shut off for the person to fall asleep. This is a type of conflict between the body and the conscious mind that wants to sleep. Thus a dream vision is produced for one part of the individual to try and communicate with the other. The real you is always able to take control and recognize what is taking place, when it has been trained to do so. So, if the body wants to relieve itself with its bodily functions, the real you may experience a running around in their dream vision trying to find a place to do so, and if the person does not want to get up, then there will be no place found for the relief. In most people, because they have been trained and conditioned to use a proper restroom, they will hold themselves even to the point of pain, if they cannot find one. Sometimes we have to go with what the Indians did, and that is use the great outdoors. In a young child this may be different, because they know mommy is always there to clean up their mess, so for the most part, they will wet the bed and keep dreaming, because they do not have a rigid conditioned mind as yet. From this simple dream a person can see there is so much more to themselves than can be realized on the surface. The mind, body and emotions all play a part in a person's makeup, and have a life of their own, and they are able to produce a communication to the conscious self, and try and get a response. Until we understand where we are and what we are doing here, each person that stays unaware of their real awareness must continue to recycle until they do wake up from the millions of lifetimes of being asleep to what is real now. And so, the simple dream is, where the situation is wholly external and outside of the conscious mind. It mainly deals with some sort of physical sensation or action. The basic human on this world relates more so to their outer situations and circumstances than they do to the internal workings of themselves, because for the most part, they do not really understand themselves, and if they do need help, beyond what is considered professional remedies and cures from this world. Here again is where a person just having a definition in a book does not necessarily equal a resolution for them, because the dreamer has no real education about their own various vehicle functions. The next type is a complex dream, where the idea and creation is from something internal. This is where the desire for things becomes a part of ourselves too, where we take on the situations that go with the desires to have whatever it is we want in our lives. It would seem to make sense to desire something, and then add certain emotion to it, but then we always run into situations having to deal with what we wanted. When a person is bothered by something, mainly the idea of it and not always the thing itself, they will have dreams along the same line, that of escape from their created environment. There are lessons to be learned from ourselves if we pay close attention, because we are the exact duplicate of the true reality, only on a smaller scale. This is why worshipping something like a god does not make sense, even though a large majority of people would disagree, because we are our own creative being. Here is one of the biggest physiological mishaps that has been created, and can be a band-aid for a time, even lifetimes, but there will come the very moment when the person has had enough of the over-bombardment of deceptive tactics that have plagued mankind for centuries. The case here being the invention of something outside of each of us, such as the gods of man, yet it affects the internalmost being of ourself. And that is, first of all, the idea of something greater than ourselves, and the supposed actually that there is something outside of ourselves that is greater. This scenario has perplexed humans for untold eons, because the certain few who rule and persecute the masses have deemed it so. What I am referring to is the creation of the invented gods of man, as a prime example, and what most unaware enslaved people have given themselves to. The masses have given their body, mind, and what they deem to be their soul, to something that has been purposely created outside of themselves, as a deceptive ploy to actually control them in a misleading manner. As it is only evident that everything each of us do is from ourselves, because we are always the decision maker, even though we are constantly dealing with things which are created outside of ourselves. Here is where a real lostness occurs, as events and situations seem to look normal, but at some point begin to change and go into another direction. What I am describing here is the workings of this material realm, and how the actuality of it is, yet when a person cannot control their outer environment, they then many times have internal situations that become evident with their dream visions. A good example is a person can have a perfectly good life going for them, and they are an upstanding person in the community, as they prove this by attending their decided place of belief or faith on a regular basis. But for some, when a loved one dies, they may become upset with their so-called creator, and why is it that he has let this happen? Here again is an inner conflict occurring, because of an outer situation, which has had very little understanding attached to it, and absolutely no real education with the dreamer. I am not saying that a person cannot, or should not go through their own personal drama because of this. I am pointing to the idea and fact that when a person has a real education about what is really taking place with each one of us on this level, then they will know for sure that each of us must at some point pass from here, so that we can do better for ourselves, and that there are no gods who are controlling any of the events in our lives, unless we allow it to be so. Here again everything goes back to the decider, and what each of us decides for ourselves. Both of my earthly parents have passed on into whatever situations they have deemed for themselves, and when they did, I had no grief, because I knew they were perfectly fine with the choices they had made for themselves. It is not my place to question what the next person does, no matter what they do. I may use their experience as examples and a comparison for myself and anyone else to make even a better choice, but no matter what happens, they are on their own journey. The reality of the situation, as they were being my parents on this level, is what I am experiencing with the ideas here have nothing to do with my journey, and most of all the whole of life. So, an internal attitude or situation begins to occur and can last for decades and even lifetimes, because of a lack of proper understanding, and most of all real guidance and a real education. There is always more to what is seen on the surface to a person leaving this realm of experience. First and foremost, a person's choice is always first, unless they give away their choice to another, which is also their right to do so. Then, there is situations from their past they have created, which they have forgotten about, and now the circumstances have come together, to where the person must go with the effects of their causes. Here is a huge blind spot for most people, as they have been taught that this is the only life there is for them. Of course, reality is always now, and it will continue to be so, no matter what humans decide. The reality I am referring to has nothing to do with the material content of this world and the mind and bodies of those having experience here. It is the unseen reality that is everything that I am pointing out. This then becomes the evidence for each of us that what we deem to be so eventually does show up. So, getting back to the internal situations that can become conflicts is something that everyone must deal with until they can figure themselves out according to their real awareness. It is not anything bad per se that a person should worship and pray to something outside of themselves, such as their gods in the clouds, but that at some point in eternity, when they have outgrown all the invented ideas they have come to know here, they will look for something real. Until then, the conflicts and confusion will continue, and possibly forever. For those who are the new supporters and new leaders, they have a great education that is always taking place, whether they fully realize this or not. The human self will always be the last to know, and so one of the best things to practice is great patience with oneself. As we continue to practice being now, we eventually see beyond what the eyes and mind are always observing. Then at some point, we have arrived and we are more than comfortable with ourselves, because we are being now. Being now is the best real position to be with, but we also need the real guidance and the ongoing real education. There is no end to what is possible, even though what we see in front of us will soon be gone, and all the people we know and do not know will always be somewhere, and they will be where they have the right to decide to be, so all is cool now. When the real guides come into our lives, they lead us past our desires and creations into the fluidness of the all-at universes of real freedom. In the meantime, while we are here, it is best to pay attention to the nightly lessons in your dream visions. If a person is not a new supporter, then they should start up immediately and take the True Completeness course, so they will not have to return here again unaware. All of us do a lot of our personal thinking in symbols during our awakened hours, as it is easier to attach ourselves to an image, such as a person, place or destination. For the most part, this is the literal imagery a person may use, because of their earthly training. This can many times be confused with what your dream visions mean on a broader scale of understanding. It takes a lot of time and attention to be able to recognize more than just the personal truths that each of us has come to adopt for ourselves. As we each have a personal life here, we also have a real life that is not seen in the same way. Our real life is very well hidden, because the personal self overshadows it for untold lifetimes. Because it is so easy to create any idea we want to, paying close attention to the real you takes a lot of intensive training. This is one of the reasons mostly people cannot imagine the true reality, so they see the ultimate as an old man with a beard. Today, it is basically the image of the saviors and saints, which have artistically been modified to fit the times. Because the idea of man being created in the same image as their God, it only stands to reason why people use the human image as their God being human-like. The original idea of man being in the same image is all about the real awareness, the real you, the new, the ancient, that which is real light. The old term is soul, but soul is now the unconscious entity controlled by the authoritarians and the gods of men. When soul meets the real gods and is given the real connection, that soul becomes new and more aware. Most of the religions have human imagery as their front to the public, instead of directing them to the true reality life is, the all is, which is an unimaginable beingness of all it and sound. Their great reality is far beyond the mental imagery of the governor gods of the astral and mental worlds. Because mostly people have decided upon a secondary image of the true reality, which is the space gods, these same people will stay for lifetimes with their decidedness, and continue to worship and support something which cares little for them, because these gods of man have already proven themselves throughout human history as those who support all the demise that most people agree to hear. The Christians think of Christ as their God, and the Buddhists look to Buddha as their God. It is very obvious these are symbols, and it is the same with the new supporters with the real guides. They look to the new waves with Rebelzer, Paul, Yol and all the others as their representatives of the all is, until they can perceive the is for themselves. This is the vast difference between the invented ideas of the church, which entails a belief, and to have faith in a God that one hopes is there. The great trinity of the church and most religious orders is belief, faith and hope. These three ideas lie in the spiritual realms, which are the first three levels, the material worlds and the two heavens of man. The God-believers have been told what their God is, and for the most part, it is all a mystery and he is never seen, and so even in a person's dream visions they would not be experiencing who their God is. I have personally dealt with the God of man, the Kalaam God, and I provide a fun-filled adventure in Book 4 of my Adventure ST series, The Adventures of Rebelzer Tars. First of all, the church and their paraded circus of ritual, which the Pope usually heads, have no idea about the God they pray to, so how can they relay anything to their followers except the mystery idea? The history of the church is a bloodbath, but most people do a good job of pretending it isn't so. Then, with the added ideas of belief, faith and hope, what one has is a lot of invented and confirmed superstition, along with mocked-up ritualistic ceremonies, like really good actors playing their part, who are providing an authentic hoax that has endured the test of time. On the other hand is the real universal guides, who provide real freedom from all the drudgery and restrictions, regulations and rules, along with the intimidation of the rep systems. These great beings have no history of destroying anything on this planet. They only provide a real benefit to those who will listen, and they are real now. The real experiences of the new supporter become an actuality in their real awareness, and learn the great ability to position oneself into any real position they wish. Real truth and real freedom is the greatest of all positions in the real universes of the all-is, whereas the church keeps people groveling on the earth to gods no one can find. One of the reasons for the God mystery is simple. The church does not want their followers to know and experience who their gods really are, because then the governor gods would be exposed for who they really are. And so the symbols of their gods are looked to, such as Jesus, who did not deal with the church, nor profess any Christianity plan as is existing today. Here is where the masses have looked to the creation and symbols of marketing ploy, which is a front used as the process to put people through. The actuality of life is sound and light, which is real truth, and can only be referenced on this level at this time. With the new wave is the new man. The new man represents the written material, and there is no marketing ploy, nor is there any misrepresentation at all. What the new man is presenting is a reference to the true reality and not something in the literal sense, from what he is writing about. The masses have been seduced to a huge professional marketing ploy, as is more than demonstrated how the big pharmaceutical companies have taken over people's mind with the idea that drugs are better than natural cures and remedies. It can be so that certain medications do have their place, but not as an overall solution for what is natural on this planet. So, with what is taking place with so much big business today, money becomes their symbol of success and not a real life. With all that is taking place on this planet, who else it is that is providing an avenue new to real truth? The religious and spiritual paths are supposed to be the pinnacle of knowledge and wisdom on this planet, but as we look to the real side life is, and what the real guides know to be real, we find that so many of the old and traditional paths and faiths are lost in the astral worlds, and many of their masters and followers are tap-lined to the Kaloam god. With this tap-lining is a huge reptilian influence that most dumbed-down humans are not aware of. What is taking place with all of us here, and on the many levels all of us are spread across, is a huge educational experience. The symbols that have been created since time began are part of the process to learn from, as a child starts by learning their ABCs, but there comes a point when we have gone through so much that it is time for a new beginning. When the All-Is provides what will become so, then it is time for the new presentation to appear, in spite of what has already been created and agreed upon. It then becomes the uphill task of the person chosen by the All-Is, and agreed upon by the real guides, who will go out into this world of fossilized humans, who are usually more interested in getting rid of anything new, unless it in some way appeases their pleasure principle. Most people will take for granted what the new man is doing here, and will usually mock and slander him, then pick apart what he is presenting. What the new man is presenting can be tested and shown to be real, but it is up to the person viewing him and the assortment of attitudes one has, that always stands in the way at first, so one has to take their time with the new sessions. The new man is also a symbol in the psych realms for those who want to go beyond the truths of others and their own person-limited truths. There are multitudes of symbols around us all the time, and so much of it is tied to some sort of deception or ploy. The seal of the President of the United States is a symbol that is put before the viewing masses as an honorable certificate, and is to signify the person holding the office. This was a noble idea set forth to assure those who support it. Unfortunately, what the symbol is supposed to represent seems to have nothing to do with most of those who have held this office, especially in the last century. Since the creation of the United States, the us is definitely not as many people think it is. As I am laying this out here, I am merely reporting the news and what is really taking place here. The certain few, those who rule this world in a cunning and ruthless fashion, use many of the well-known symbols that have become a part of human history as a means to their own end, and are not interested in the welfare of others. Here is where your dream visions begins to show what is really taking place, but only according to what each person can handle and deal with themselves. Many times, those people who are right next to the deceptors, for the most part, cannot at all see what is taking place right in front of them. Sad to say, this is a huge epidemic today. Until a person is ready to face everything in life, then how is it they can have the total awareness they're looking for? The true reality life is to be real with everything, and this takes time in the true sense. The real guides teach the new supporter how to deal with almost every situation, and turn it creatively to their advantage. For those who are more aware, what is taking place becomes a challenge to be dealt with. The way I see it, the worse this world gets, the more focused upon the all is I become, as I have set this into motion, as an automatic direction for myself. Most people will stay with their fears and unknowingness of what is really taking place behind the scenes here. The certain few who rule this planet, the dark brats, have thousands and even millions of people around the globe, who are their co-workers, and the people have very little idea who they are really supporting. This is the reason I use Harold and Reptilian Joanny of the Corona Corporation with my adventures, because they are part of the same alliance as the certain few, the One World Order. The Vatican in Rome and the Pope are looked upon as something that has been termed as holy down through the ages. The holy term now stands for the dark side all the way, as the Vatican rules the earth, as the most evil institution ever. And so it is with the Mahwanta, the lowly Kim mustard. It would not seem so on the surface, but the symbols they are using, which were set into motion by Paul, no longer have the same value, as they are deceiving their followers, as is the present religious and political systems with all their symbols. The American flag is a huge symbol for the hundreds of millions of people, as most of them are taken with the emotional attachment to what they see as the flag, which represents the United States. None of these things and so many more ideas are not good or bad, as they are what each person decides for themselves to agree with. It is not so that because a person agrees to what the Econ Corp, the American flag, the presidency and other things represent, that any of it is true. So, we can have these symbols and ideas all around us, and we can play along with them, as we are trying to survive this world with all those who are not interested in real truth. As always, there is some kind of conflict going on with this planet. The present political systems have put thousands of American troops into various countries, which is publicized as necessary, but actually part of a continuous takeover with the certain few. This is the reason so many people are upset with all the wars that have gone on, especially since Vietnam, as an example, because they know within themselves a conspiracy is taking place, but they cannot always put their finger on it. Because, at the same time, they want to be loyal Americans and trust what the President and the Congress are telling them, but it's more than obvious and especially from the real side, many of the governments on the earth cannot be trusted at all. So, with many Americans and the rest of this world, there is a huge confusion with themselves, which in turn creates all kinds of strange dreams, which most people do not pay attention to, and if they do, their dreams are usually like nightmares. The confusion of the masses is purposely done by so many world governments, and it would seem that the opposite would be so. The certain few are in huge jeopardy, as they are trying every which way to steal all they can from everyone. All of what they are doing shows up on the real side. This is where the process of a real education is very important, more so than just dream symbolism from those who know nothing about the all-is and the real guides. For one to simply figure out the meaning of their dreams is the first step, as one of the boys may show a person there is more beyond what their life is at the present time from an experience they have on the real side. Here again is the literal matrix, and how it holds most people to so many strange dimensions that have become familiar, but are actually creations, that have nothing to do with survival, but more so a person's demise, and at the same time look to be so good and authentic. What is taking place on this world should be looked at and understood, but not necessarily from the news media, as they are controlled by the dark brats and they slant and distort almost everything. It is learning to see through the actuality of the events and the intentions taking place here. It would be like any of us attending a class in school, and while the teacher is giving the lesson, there are things taking place outside that may become a distraction. It is okay to note what is taking place, but to get up and be pulled from one's focus, then becomes another position and issue. This is what has happened on this earth with all the over-creativeness taking place, that has little or no reference to what is real. People have become overly confused, and at the same time have agreed to it so much that it has become their lifestyle. The reason for what is taking place here is that most people have no real comparison to compare to. They do have what they came with into this world with, and that is their body, and they were given something to wear, and from there they were raised by people who loved them, as an example. Then, they finally became educated and went out into this world, and decided their own position with the awareness they have. They then joined in with everyone else who was raised basically the same, and voila, the world of today appears as it is. There is no so-called mystery to any of this, except for the mystery most people have accepted to supposedly be so from others, who know nothing about reality and what is real. The simplicity of life is always with each of us, and it always works best for everyone. Dream symbolism has been observed throughout the ages, and most certainly when there is a crisis of some kind. The Bible, which is about the most famous book on the earth, has many stories about the interpretation of dreams and their symbols. One of the better-known historical figures is Joseph, who was labeled as a king of dreams. Joseph had developed the insight to recognize a person's dreams, because he was taught by the best, and the lifetime he came into a body was when he was ready to do his part for mankind. Of course, just like any of us who are here to bring something wonderful, we are always dealing with the minds who like to jest and criticize about the otherworldliness that supposedly exists besides this one. The world-controlling religions still have not got their act together about a greater understanding of life than all the crafty conditioning they enact and have control over. They never will know the true reality life is, because they are more interested in deceptively controlling the masses to keep them dumbed down. It is the world religions who have created all the distension and discrimination among so many people on the planet. It is true that some people will experience the saints and saviors in their dreams, but sometimes it is an entity from the astral worlds playing tricks on the unaware humans, who can be easily fooled. as they have been by the rep systems for eons. Life is a whole lot bigger than anything taking place here, and so to grasp even a small part of one's dreams will take possibly lifetimes. The God believers like to stand on the earth and look to the skies for a sign from their hidden deity. These people have no real ability to explore, because they are taught to follow the dictates of their headmasters and the regulations they have created. This is where their overdeveloped sensor goes to work and blocks out any real experiences that try and come through to the conscious mind. For a real experience to occur can be recognized, and is no different than a person trying to get across the border of another country without the proper identity. Once a person has been regimented into a certain direction and course of their life, they will have to deal with themselves and their lostness. This is where the first several years, with being raised by one's parents many times dictates the outcome of one's life. Most parents will play it safe by doing what everyone else does, but the outcome is many times a confusion for the offspring, and that person must eventually seek out their own real guidance. The material worlds are a huge physiological melting pot of extreme experiences, which can be very dangerous to most people with a fragile consciousness, who are the unaware humans. There are so many artificial fronts that have been created from the ancient documents of belief, faith and hope. These three ideas are used in everything around us, including TV commercials that like to advertise unknowingly for their gods. Belief, faith and hope are tied to the space gods, who are the domain controllers of the earth and the two heavens of man. They do not want people getting past their encased realms of glittery glamour. This place is a big test for all who are involved, but it can easily be resolved when one is willing to pay attention to the real guidance and doing the new sessions. When the real guides give a person real experiences, starting with their dream visions, a sudden difference begins to occur in the real awareness of the individual almost immediately. When I give people or groups the new sound, the new you, and they test it, especially those who already use the AUM or OM or WHO, which is the words of the space gods, they begin to experience the difference. The OM or AUM, and words like Amen, that have the Ah sound to them, and are a direct connection to the mental gods of religion and most spiritual paths, who rule mankind. When people are having a conversation together, it is interesting to note how many times people pause while they are thinking and say, OM. It is the similar sound one makes when the doctor puts the tongue depressor in one's mouth. For most, a conception of something becomes their reality, but in fact, a conception is merely a temporary creation. This is also true of the gods of man, for they will be replaced someday. The real guides parade great symbols to their new supporters, to wake them up from the lower worlds of the passing dream. This is very important, and each person who has the awareness to do so should pay close attention. It is with this same idea how our dreams use certain symbols as a way to communicate to those who are still unaware of the all-is in the human conceived consciousness. Those who pay attention to their dream visions will be shown very special symbols that relate to the real universes and the true reality, and so the true completeness course for those involved does take time. Now one is dealing with a bigger picture, which is real and beyond the concepts of the mind and all the control it has. The real guides have one real purpose, and that is to get each of their new supporters into the real universes, to experience real freedom now. A person's symbolism is based upon the purpose of concealing the true meaning of the dream experience from the conscious mind, and to also help stretch the person into looking further within themselves, instead of just looking to their mind and the mind's creations from others. Because the mind of man is what it is, to have real truth directly to most humans becomes dangerous, so a disguise is performed, and it is up to the individual to pursue the real meaning. Almost everything in this world has some form of disguise, as opposed to the straightforwardness of the literal and logical senses we have all been taught by the deceptive systems that rule this planet. The very reason for the present educational systems is to keep people in the dark about what is really taking place with those who try and manipulate everyone. The world controllers do not want people to know about the other dimensions, including the various levels of life, and this is why they have created the scientific community, to question anything that is not agreeable with them. This world has become a purposely planned conspiracy, marketed and controlled by the original reptilian influence that first came here, and created the humanoids as workers and slaves. Because mostly people have been taught on an unconscious level and not from an upfront and consciously aware position, the dumbed-down humans do not consider anything but what they have been taught in school as the only one-dimensional reality that exists. This is why with all the planets and stars that can be seen and unseen, most people still ask the question, is there really life on other planets? This is actually so silly, because there is life everywhere, but not everyone can see it, because they have agreed, without their conscious knowledge, to be mass hypnotized and controlled. There have been so many movies relating to what I am sharing here, but most people consider them to be science fiction, which is another created idea of those who control you right now. As you are reading this, you do have a great opportunity like never before from all the unconscious lifetimes you have been here and on other planets and in other dimensions, but you do not remember. Do the New You sessions and you will begin to see. The pleasure principle in man is always looking to satisfy the ideas of the ego and what it has come to know. This is where moral law comes into play. The rep systems justify their existence by providing their rules for people to live by, and at the same time they play and pit both sides against each other in a cunning and crafty way. As you learn to pay attention to this world around you, you will start to see what I am sharing. Of course, the animals and birds in nature do not have to abide by any old written documents, as they seem to do fine with themselves, and do not harm the natural environment, as they are deemed a lower species, by the earthly educated humans, who do ruin almost everything they touch. This is called rationalization from the invented systems to their human followers. The reason being is as to how they are raised and what they have been taught. Human history repeats itself in the same morbid way all the time, because everyone keeps agreeing to the same educational standards and socially acceptable ideas and situations that have always taken place. All of this seems to make sense to people, as they continue to go about their lives, not really knowing who they are and what they are doing here. Of course, the rep systems always have an answer that keeps people's noses to the grindstone, and so most will accept the burden and intimidation of the authoritarians. Again, all one has to do is take a little time and study human history to see that what is constantly being implemented into the streams of thought does not work in the long run. The real gods have the real cure for all. A fun idea would be to go to another planet that is like the Earth, and have the whole place for yourself and possibly your friends. But what is so much better is to be shown by the real guides, all the endless worlds that can be reached that lie within each of us, here and now. The Church and their rewritten documents have given a hint to other places and levels, but do not give any real instruction as to how to get there and what they are. They use their trinity of belief, faith and hope as their emotional model to go by, which encumbers most people to the astral realm only. The idea is, you are to believe in something, and not speak another word or ask questions, because that would be sacrilegious. Actually, as the truth is revealed, it is that these headmasters do not know what they are referring to when it comes to who their gods are. As all of us are in these material realms, certain ideas do apply at times, and the gods of man will sometimes deliver from the petitions people make to them, but these people are still stuck in the same old cycles, and have not as yet found the real universes. The real gods have been to all the various levels, and know where a person is best suited, as they become more aware with themselves. The actuality of the endlessness of the true reality life is that it is an isness. This is why I call it the is. The true reality can only be here and now and never in the past or an invented future. In a person's dream visions, one is given a hint at this true reality and how it is, but it is always up to each person to determine whether they will become a risk-taker or not, and explore beyond the confines of their educated and conditioned mind. When I was given the rod of power for the first time, I was shown what Paul Twitchell had presented that was now out of date and needed a revision. Master Darwin, Taplining Master Harold, who were appointed to do the job originally, were not interested in the true reality, but that of gaining followers, and keeping them with the gods of man and the religious idea. The real guides do not bother with the nonsense of these two and many others like them. Anyone can be shown in our dream visions who really is. The new wave is the new man now. The rod of power was what Paul referred to and had its day. The new wave is the new nowness of the all is. This true reality, the sound light reality from the all is, has become more so than it was in Paul's day. In other words, it is more exposed and more real, and so in a way it becomes harder to see for most people, because they are even more ingrained to the old ways of priests, masters and gurus, but in the same instant, it is so much better for those who do perceive it now. It, as a mere example, can be the difference between what was once the Model T Ford, and then coming into this era of supercharged cars and trucks. There really is a difference, and the same is with the all is, as it is having its own life and experience always. Humans have been taught to conceive their gods, and by doing so, have boxed them according to their own wants and desires, to where the gods seemingly must obey them. And so, this is where prayer becomes a petition and an order, and many times a control over their gods and especially others. Most people have no clue that to pray for something or someone many times is an interruption, and the doer must reap the consequences. Here again is where people have been taught to go blindly with what others decide, who do not have real experiences and real guidance. The true reality is continually becoming more aware with itself, whereas the church and their doctrines of obedience, from the old dim and dusty past, continue to add more regulations to bow to. The choice is simple: fly like the eagles or stay caged like an animal. All of us will be around forever, and so it only makes sense to be totally aware and unrestricted, and to have the great life we want. This material world and all that is contained here is of an infancy state of affairs and will always be so. This is the reason for a person having dreams. They need a way out of this passing dream, which everyone thinks is the real conscious life, but it is not. And so a great in-depth study of our life according to what is being shown to us constantly should be one's first priority. Those who do not dream or remember their experiences, by practicing the new sound, the new sessions, they will start to have recollection as their real awareness steps in, and as the real guides gently reveal their new adventure to them. The ancient belief systems, even though their teachings are based upon dreams, have put a taboo on them, because they do not want their followers to escape from the domain of the Kalaam god and his overly seductive mistress, the influence. Here is where the earthly systems have created their devils, those of other paths or teaching, to keep the stranglehold of fear always in their followers. Until a person recognizes the subtitles of the influence, they are at the mercy of all the suggestiveness she brings into a person's life. Here is where a type of science fiction scenario enters into a person's life and dreams. And for the most part is going to believe that such a thing like the influence exists. Most people have heard of the religious devils that seem to plague humans at times, but for the most part, most people scoff off the ideas. One must keep in mind, the gods and the influence have all the time there is, and so they are never in a hurry to accomplish what they want, as is the overly stressed humans, who keep thinking in their minds that if they work harder they will get a lot further along. Here is where the influence uses time and space to her advantage, to secure all those who are tied to the time elements. The human ego, along with the 5 bodies of man, are a huge complex network, far beyond that of any computer program. The movies of Tran and The Matrix are excellent examples of the prisoner lifestyle the authoritarians and the influence want to continue for mankind. In both movies and so many like them, there is no natural environment, but just a constant pressure to try and survive the terrain or be eliminated. The earth and all the round worlds are set up the same way, as the masses have allowed the certain few to take control and be the power masters of this little planet in space. I have had lifetimes of experiences with the influence, and she will take on endless roles to try and get her way, especially with those who are trying to make their way out of the psych realms. The unconscious mind of a person and how they have agreed to set themselves up already knows what is not allowed to pass down to the personal mind of the physical person. This is where the real awareness takes hold of their own life, as opposed to the dictates of the old outdated agreements. At first, the mind is always stubborn, like a person that likes to eat a lot, but knows they must discipline themselves if they want to lose the weight. The pleasure principle wants the sensation and taste of eating, but the real you wants a change, and when a change is decided, that means a person can see the long run, if they continually abuse themselves. Most people will not take on the challenge of a change for themselves, and so as their life continues the same way for the longest time, they eventually start experiencing the effects. When we were young, we could eat all kinds of good-tasting things, and never had a concern about what we're eating, or the weight we might take on, or even the effects of what we liked. But, as we quickly became older, the conditioning came with us, and now some people are looking at weight problems, diabetes and even emotional behaviors that cannot be figured out. The medical professions seem to like the pill idea of drugging people. It really is a good business for those who administer all the so-called miracle drugs and cures. It is for sure everything has its place, but there can be many avenues of opportunity to look to besides the artificial approach. Most people do not investigate what they are taking, but simply go with what the suggested officialness deems best for a person. The new man is here to provide the real cure for all, which starts with a person's dream visions, that will definitely demonstrate a much better way to heal oneself. You must learn to pay attention. The conditioned sensor in one usually offers a variety of substitutes, instead of the straightforward truth as to what one is experiencing on the other levels. So, what comes from so much of our nightly visions is an exaggeration of funny stuff that must be seen in a particular light to figure out. Until a person has connected with the real guides, their dreams will be according to their personal earthly life for the most part. Even the gods of man do not want their followers to see their wondrous heavens, because they want to keep their people to the earth, and make them think that heaven is but a dream to consider, but not to reside in. If people are happy and content, then they do not need the gods of man. It would be like on earth, where a person is totally rich and they own their own island. They do not need to deal with the political rulers and their foolish laws. But, the earth being what it is, a person can have what they want for a while, but this place always catches up with one. Besides, our life here is so temporary. While we are living here, it seems as though our life will never end, but when the day comes for us to leave, we then wonder why we didn't take the time to explore and discover why we came here in the first place. As one is ready to make the move into the next level, the mind reacts and floods the view with all that one has experienced during their present life, which are just visions of memories along with some feelings. When a person is properly prepared, they are able to cross over with ease and leave all the past behind. The real guides prepare one, as though they were a professional. Becoming a doctor is a lot of learning and endurance, but the end result is something so substantial, and the same is with obtaining real freedom, only it is a bigger course for sure. Most of us have spent lifetimes trying to find the real guides, to teach us how to get past the psych realms, and so now is the time it can be so. Watch your dream visions at night. There is always a conflict somewhere in the psych realms, as a person ventures out unaware they are leaving their body every night. Most people do not know they are traveling in their other bodies, let alone know they even have other bodies. Until a person meets with the real guides, they are usually doing a form of astral projection, a feeling of leaving the body from the solar plexus. Then, there are those who feel the sensation of rising above their body, and even experience flying in their dreams, as many of us have, when we were young and unconditioned by the gravitational pull of the human unawareness. Every experience we have adds to our ability to better understand there is so much more to life than what has been created and seen on this surface world. When a person experiences the falling sensation in a dream and then suddenly wakes up, it is because they were outside of themselves and then they quickly re-entered. There is a dark force in the 3 lower levels, and it pertains to those who align themselves with it. I call this aspect of the dualistic forces, the influence. To be influenced by it, one must be willing to do so. All of us are influenced by something so much of the time, and so to have the most control of our lives is to be able to recognize the influence and how it operates. During this lifetime, most will not see the influence for who she is, as she is a shadowy substance of a creature who has been produced from the wanting of her to be so. It is not that it is a female, but the female aspect does apply, as I and numerous others I know have experienced her. When I took on the Rod of Power in 2001, I was first introduced to the influence by the boys. Since then, she has tried to sway me from presenting real truth to this world, because she works with those who do not want what I am presenting to be known. She loves Harold's Joannie, because Joannie loves the influence. The dark side, the dualistic forces, is as automatic as the sun shining, as this force creates all the Maya in the 3 lower levels. It is not that this is bad in any sense, but that it operates in the passing dream of the physical realm and the 2 heavens of man. The religions have put a label to it and personified it as the devil. But it is actually a force that is part of the creative nature we reside with while in the psych realms, as we each have a body here, and simply need to recognize the influence, then we can consciously deal with it without any harm. The belief systems do not understand their own gods, and how they really work, as their gods play both sides of the portrayal of life here, just as the Republicans and Democrats appear to be in opposition, and the influence is everywhere with what is taking place. But, once a person experiences the behind the scenes with the illusions they see here, it is all the same contrived setup. Here again is where a person can believe whatever they want about what's taking place here, but it does not make it so. All deception shows up. The rep systems have decided their gods to be according to how they want them to be, as so many of the little humans on the earth are like bratty teenagers and want their way. Many people play up to the gods of man, but the gods already know the sneaky tricks humans always try. Many times, the gods do play along, because they know that whatever direction the little-minded humans take, they will end up with more karma and more grief, which means more lifetimes of the gods controlling those unaware humans who, in their own minds, seem to know so much. REALSIDE once took me on one of many journeys to the meetings of the secret societies, SS as he called them, and showed me who some of the people were and what they were doing. I did not recognize most of them, but I did see the most popular of politicians at this meeting, which was one of many he took me to, so that I will see the true nature of what is taking place with the systems of the earth. One of the interesting aspects of what he was showing me was all the very subtle tap lines, which were running from the backs of these people and then out of the building and into various parts of the world to all those who were connected to these people. These people do not have any idea what is happening with them, just like a person can have a cancer growing in them, which may not be detected for years. This is why your dream visions can save your life here when you pay attention to the real guidance. The gods of man have three basic parts. The front, or the appearance, that the audience sees as benevolent, which is more so the idea of believing in something. Secondly, is the restrictiveness, which is the regulatory fear-generating aspect people put their faith in, as people are taught to fear their gods. Third is the influence, which the followers want, and hope will be around to provide what is needed as they long to worship something, which gets back to the invented idea of belief again. The church uses the benevolent head as the front that appears to the crowd, like the Pope does as he appears to his onlookers, and acts the humble servant of his lords and masters. Then as the trap is set, those who agree are plagued with the restrictiveness and implemented with all the rules and regulations, and intimidated into agreeing to the ancient rewritten doctrines and the gods, who look down on humans to make sure they obey their taskmasters. With all of this, the influence then has new people to play with and to keep subdued for as many lifetimes as possible, as it is her nature to seduce and then to control them. These three aspects are what make up the gods of man, and so because most humans are at a particular position of awareness, which is basically physical and low mental, they cannot totally see what is taking place with all they have agreed to. They only see what they are shown, and they are not to ask questions, as all is a mystery that only the gods know. It is not that all of what I have described is bad in any sense, no more than a crocodile living in the swamps, and if what the belief systems are proposing is a satisfactory lifestyle, then by all means each person has the right to believe whatever they like. My position is to report the news, and merely provide a comparison and more opportunities, but of course those who rule will deny what I am presenting, and to be false and an illusion, whatever. I am not making up a commentary, I am only reporting the news as I experience it. All of us are in the same life, and as we exercise our free will, we decide the choices we make. As I am providing all this information, it can then be tested by anyone, to see that it is true and real. Those who fall prey to the effects of what the belief systems propose, like grabbing a live wire, soon experience their own demise according to the choices and involvement a person has made, and so it is a matter of becoming more aware, and not one of rebellion. The history of the Church is one of a convincing warfare, and that as if there was anyone out there who did not believe or agree with their policies, then they were hunted and exterminated. It is not a matter of repenting, as so many have been led to believe, but one of gaining a real ability to be indifferent to the blindness that most people like to involve themselves with. Most want the influence in their lives, and so it continues to exist for a lot of unaware people, and when the time comes for all the effects to start showing up, they do not know where to turn, so they usually go to religion, which is oversaturated with the influence. It is the seductive side that looks so pleasing and helpful, and it is what people hope to be a part of and accepted with. This is the earth, and this is how it will always be, so those who are the peacemakers, and wanting there to be peace, are usually working hand in hand with the belief systems, as a ploy to those humans who will listen to their propaganda. The real universal guides are extraordinary and far beyond the reach of the influence, and what is being created from the unaware humans on this level and the two heavens of man. They are direct to the all is with real truth and real freedom. As one stands back and watches all that is taking place on this world, it is not hard to see the forces each person decides will end their life, as it does their dream visions. Because each of us must live our lives here, we also decide how our life will be, and so what most people have is a very limited arena to choose from, and that is why I am here. I have been to the gods of man and seen their operations from the inside, and I know from experience what they are doing. They are a particular way, just like the wild beasts that roam the jungles, who are nice to their own kind for the most part, but when something that looks good for dinner comes along, then their attitude changes. When a person understands the forces they are dealing with, then they can make better choices, and learn to rise above the drama like a bird in flight. The basic idea of humans is they walk on the ground and all else is a mystery. Because the belief systems have told people their gods are a mystery, and as people believe it to be so, then they have accepted the influence as their way of life, and are stuck with her until they decide different. Just like all the ingredients in a cake, it takes the emotional ideas that are charismatically presented to seal the deal for those wanting to be with the influence. The average person mainly thinks in terms of their personal life and not much more, as they are limited by their upbringing, and wanting to be accepted into the social order like everyone else. They may belong to some idealistic group, such as a religion, metaphysics, meditation, yoga, or any one of the numerous invented creations on the planet today, and so their dream visions will imply and be influenced by their connections to these groups and programs. Donald Trump, Tony Robbins, Martha Stewart, Oprah, and hordes of other icons like them have created great empires to be admired and are worshipped by the unaware millions, but these people have no way out of the three lower levels with all their tap lines. They imply great business plans, but what they are offering does not surpass the realms of Maya. What is not seen on the surface are the tap lines that are placed within the unseen various bodies of people, like the malware in one's computer. These tap lines serve the purpose of those who put them there, just as Neo had in him in the movie The Matrix. It is the same with all the little microscopic germs all of us carry around and are in the air. We do not see them, yet we know they are there, but for the most part, many do not want to believe they exist. Most of life is unseen and hidden, and so to compensate for this unawareness, people use their minds and decide what they think life is to be, and as it comes out different than what they thought, they simply pretend it isn't so. Just like global warming, that has been taking place for the longest time, and how most people want to deny it so they can continue, as they always have with their personal life. But now the public is very aware of it, as it has become overly confirmed to them. This is how most people are. Instead of exploring life to see the bigger picture, they mainly hide from the reality of their present situations, even though they think otherwise. All of us are experiencing this world and the various and vast implications of it. Our modern society has produced an endless amount of fantastic phenomena for everyone to experience, yet none of it has anything to do with real freedom. There is no answer to life with science, only physical applications. People do have the freedom to do what they want, and so again, in their minds they look at the choices they are making as the only freedom there is and can ever be. No wonder most people cannot understand their dream visions, nor do they want to. They are too busy checking their cell phones and looking for the next thrill as the inventors bring their goodies to the public. Again, it is not a matter of changing anything here, but becoming more aware in the true sense, and adding to our existing experiences. The new men and the real universal guides are constantly providing more opportunities and making it fun. When I was a member of Paul's original teaching, then it became the corporation after Paul left, I was being shown the tap lines that were put into the membership on the astral level without their consent, or them being aware of what was taking place. A very suspect fellow that headed spiritual services is one of the culprits. I was constantly being shown by Rebelzer and Paul what was taking place at what I now call the Corona Corporation. The president of the corporation, under Corona, along with all the board members are involved as well. Just like Darwin and John Roger Hinkins, it's all about the money and control. The same is true of Harold, who is under the direction of Corona, because Harold is the puppy dog, who gets his instructions from her. Harold was at the passing of the rod of power in 2001, but does not have the courage to admit it. He is hiding, just like all those who are under him, along with his reptilian Joannie. Rebelzer Tars and the real guides do not recognize the corporation of Corona as anything, nor do they back what is taking place there. If a person wants real answers, then they should ask to be shown, as they lay their body down at night, and the real guides will show them who all the false headmasters. Harold, Darwin, John Roger and multitudes of others use the same ridiculous psychic stunts to keep their people emotionally tied to them as servants and worshippers. The rep systems do the same, as they have millions connected to their programs from the lower astral realm with their tap lines. Unless a person is with the real guidance, then it would be best to belong to nothing at all. Even so, many of the non-profit organizations that look so good are not what they really seem. Check them out in your dream visions to see if they will guide a person to real freedom. My dream adventures and dream visions have been super extensive this lifetime, because of how I have applied myself with the real guides. There are many paths and teachings on this planet, and most people always look to what is popular, and some of those who are providing answers are sincere, and do have a grasp of a particular truth, but if they cannot take a person to the real universes of real freedom, then what good are they in the long run? When a person does not dream, or even know that the possibility exists, then what do they really have, but a temporary physical existence only, a one-dimensional life with nowhere else to go? This lowly area of life is one-dimensional, even though the scientific community says it is three-dimensional and possibly four. Past lives play a big part in what takes place in a person's dream visions, or may not take place at all. Because all of us have come from a succession of seemingly endless lifetimes to this very moment, there is so much more to us than we see on the surface. All of us are the sum total of our experiences, as each lifetime is in addition to all we have come to know. So instead of just believing in something as mostly people have been taught, the clue to life everyone is seeking is to become more aware. This is not really taught, but collecting all kinds of silly worthless information is. This is where the existing systems keep people dumbed down so they will be servants, and obey those who are being supported. A person's dreams display a huge variety of events that one is not usually consciously relating to in their personal life. This is very important to discover, because all hidden experience leads to the recognition of the true source life is. The average person is usually looking for a relationship, as they see the whole world seems to be based upon the boy meets girl scenario. Of course, the mating of the two sexes is part of this life, but there is so much more. Many relationships entail their own drama, and when this does occur, and if it prolongs itself, then the parties involved are once again under the lords of karma, and must continue to repeat more lifetimes until they have adjusted themselves. As the parties come into future lives, they have forgotten who they were, and so they are given the opportunity to forget what took place many years ago also. Even though these people have new bodies, and new minds they have taken on here for more episodes, they will still retain the emotional ideas and psych energy within their etheric body, because they have made it part of their makeup. An example of this is two people I taught for more than 20 years in one of my classes. Stan and Jace were not your ordinary couple. He was a 6'4" black man from the darkest part of who knows where, and Miss Jace was a 5'2" white gallons from your typical American family. These two had been together for lifetimes, as they were still working out their personal drama and still together. While I was teaching the classes in the early days of our meetings, they both discovered through their dream visions with the real guides, they had experienced lifetimes of drama together. In this life, Stan's position was of an immature emotional poutiness, mixed with a lot of hostility and brutal anger. I really do sound like Dr. Phil here. Miss Jace was the total opposite, as she was a fun-loving and always laughing person that really paid attention to detail. With the real guidance they found out, Miss Jace had done Big Stan during their last lifetime. In other words, she killed him, and so he held on to all the emotional rage, because of what she had done. And so, as they both returned for more rounds, he is now huge and she is now small, so there is a big challenge for both of them. They both were in the marching band together in high school and obviously lovers when they were young. At some point, they wanted to live the real and rugged life, so they took off for the state of Washington and lived in a cabin like the pioneers. Jace told me stories of all she went through, as some of the physical situations became very violent and brutal. No matter why she killed Stan in her previous life, she still had to go through the terror of what she had created. They were both in Washington when Mount St. Helens erupted. For them to be there, it was like a sign of what they were going through as the mountain erupted. At some point while they were there, even with all the radical drama they were dancing with, they discovered Paul's teaching and started to go to classes locally. They were both ready to climb the mountain of this during this life, as I met them years later when they moved to Orange County. They were both intent on what I was teaching them and would attend the classes all the time, except when there was a big disturbance between them. I really liked both of them and I would talk with them for hours on a weekly basis, usually one-on-one with the other one someplace else. They had a very good understanding of so much, yet the emotional drama continued. They would tell me how I would come into their dream visions, and help sort things out at times. Because I was being trained to take on the rod of power, Stan was a seer in his own way, and we became the best of friends, as he was like my bodyguard, and I liked the idea as it was fun. He was seeing as the time was approaching for the passing of the rod of power, and that I would be getting it soon, as it was nearing 2001. Eventually, Stan and Miss Jace divorced, then she soon found a neat guy, who was my mailman for years, Mr. Pat. When Jace married Pat, they were perfect for each other, and to this day must be living happily ever after, as I have not seen them since 2003. Anyhow, this is a great example of what a lot of us go through without our knowledge of what is really taking place. Now, I know Dr. Phil and Oprah look really good on the TV with all their great advice, but guess what? They have no idea of all that goes on within a person's real life from the real side. Theirs is a one-dimensional view that pleases the unaware audience they play to. Respectfully, they do have their part, but what they are offering will get a person very little in the long run, because they are just faces of entertainment. When a person has real freedom, they then have access to everything, way more than any rich and popular movie star or politician, or even any of mankind's wonderfully dramatized historical figures. Again, all these little things are part of the one-dimensional world of the phenomenal ego and pleasure principle. All of us must go through the process, as we did when we were growing up and wore diapers. And so it is a matter of when a person will become more aware and explore their dream visions, and connect with rebels or tars and the real guides. The dualistic forces, which start at the top of the mental worlds, and flow downward until they reach the bottom of life, where humans are under the direction of the Kaloam God, the big god of all the unaware. Kaloam is the governor god of the upper heavenly levels beyond his brother Jot, who is known as Jehovah in the earthly scriptures and Lord Governor of the astral worlds. Each unaware soul that resides in the three lower levels is usually under Kaloam's direction and his beloved influence. He is also known as the three-headed god, who Paul referred to in his writings. His heads are the benevolent head, the serpent head and the influential head. All the renderings and drawings of the old gargoyles are actually a depiction of the serpent head of the Kaloam god, just like in India, where they worship the Kali and the gods with all the arms. Within so many churches, especially the older ones, there is sometimes a display of Jesus on the cross, which is a symbol of his event as a sacrifice, and also the cross, which is a grave marker and a sign and symbol of death. The church invented the story about Jesus sacrificing his life for others, which they actually instigated, and of course the whole idea makes no sense, but the general public has bought it anyhow. It has taken the church centuries to develop the emotional attachment of humans to certain symbols and ideas, as they then wield the control over their supporters. This is the earth and this is how it is here. No matter how strange the gods look and actually are, people still worship them, as has been seen with all the different shapes, sizes and configurations of these unknown deities. No matter how afraid people have become of their gods, which is many times mentioned in their holy scriptures, they still bow to them. In times gone by, these same deities demanded sacrifices, because man was more stubborn then, and so the gods made sure people obeyed and were fear-driven. All the ancient rituals of the past are carried by those in their causal memory body, who took part in these ceremonies. The scriptures from the past were written as business plans to control the unaware into a blind submission. It is rather humorous that people think there is something divine about worshipping some unseen and unknown god, with fear being the actual motivator, even though many times people think it is love. Of course there are those who truly do love their gods, but realistically they do not know what they are worshipping and loving. Today, with all the unnecessary restrictions and laws, the gods of man no longer resort to the same tactics as is written in the popular scriptures of this world, because people are more aware and will not stand for it, so the gods use the influence along with the rep systems, to keep the masses in line with all sorts of rules, 9-to-5 drudgery, and mounds of paperwork and filling out forms. The gods of man are very pleased with all this, and the rulers and controllers, who work consciously and unconsciously with the Kalam God, are very happy with the outcome and the lifestyle they have. But of course, these same stupid controlling humans, that think they are really getting away with what they are doing, will soon find themselves in a great turmoil, because the gods of man can produce endless bodies with unaware souls in them. So when the karmic judgments come for those who rule the rep systems, their Kalam God will not be there to back them up in the courtroom, where there is no plea bargaining. All of this does seem harsh, but it's simply because of the choices each person makes for themselves. Only 1 out of a billion people will become real risk takers, and do what others will not. The dualistic forces are always present here, and because of how the influence has been created, she is doing her best in swaying people into staying with all the agreed upon deceptive programs and sultry passions. At the same time, the real guides are around looking for those who have an ounce of courage to see if they will risk taking a chance, and learn to become more aware about the influence and the controlling gods. When anyone reads what the new man has written, and they have a bit of insight within them, they will soon begin to see the real light and realize, what I am presenting is real and true. As a person is conditioned to mainly consider the dualistic forces of good and bad, right and wrong, and then they suddenly learn to see a small amount of real truth, there becomes a conflict of interest within themselves with a regimented mind and emotions. For the most part, most people will always choose their personal life first, before taking on the risk of becoming more aware and free. Today, everyone wants everything now, they just do not have the time to be patient with almost anything. What has been created with the social structures has also created a huge boredom among people. As the society all of us are involved with has evolved, so has the impatience of most people, which is actually a point of being bored with what people may think as life. But what we are each experiencing here is not the whole of life, but merely a place in life that has been created from the dirt. With so much information around and available, most think they have their life figured out, but the opposite is true, because what they really have is a world of a whole lot more illusion and mysterious phenomena to deal with. Even though the all-is has more or so exposed itself into the bubble of sight realms, since Paul Twitchell was here, it is even harder for people to sit still and take the time to see what is right in front of them. There is so much more phenomena occurring now with all of today's inventiveness, and most people are standing in line in their minds to see what the next entertaining act and magic show will be. I enjoy the movies and usually learn something here, but to many, the movies and all the glitter is a lifestyle. Dressing up and looking cute for a date is fun at times, but if it is a person's whole life, then they will just grow old, as this life becomes once again dead for them, like all the lost souls, who are doing this and will return unaware in the future. I gave a presentation in Huntington Beach years ago, and one of the people who showed up was a lady who told me one of her dreams. I could tell the real gods had given her this experience before she came to hear me speak. The dream was rather simple. As she was out walking at night, and came upon a graveyard with black wrought iron ornate gates, as many graveyards have, especially in those scary movies, she went over and opened the gates, and then proceeded to walk through the graveyard, as though she were walking into her house, as she explained how casual the scene was to her. As she walked amongst the graveyard and saw all the headstones, she also noticed there was water everywhere throughout the entire place. At some point the experience ended. At my presentation, she said the experience was so real, and when she woke up she could not forget it. She saw an advertisement for my presentation on dreams and so decided to come. Again, Here is where the real guides first show a person through their dream visions and then line up a meeting to confirm what they have experienced, if they are ready and searching. Unfortunately, most people do not follow through. They usually go back to their personal life and continue watching something entertaining on TV. Her dream was showing her a watery graveyard, which is what the earth is. This is how simple her dream was, but she couldn't see it, because of her conditioning and all the phenomena in her life, so for the most part, it meant nothing to her. This is where life is continually providing examples and demonstrations, but who really takes the time to see and listen and investigate further. These dreams can actually save a person's life, your real awareness, once properly understood. The real guides provide a lot of opportunity, as they work from the real side life is, as they can see all that goes on in a person's life. Expanding upon the dream in their graveyard. She is definitely looking for her real awareness, as all people are, but she must continue to take the risk and unravel the mysteries of herself until she can come to the point of recognizing that she is a being of light with all life, and then to eventually recognize the true reality life is more so than just the gods of man. The graveyard is part of her wake-up call to this world of dreams and nightmares, as we can all see how the earth is today is very polluted and poisoned and getting worse every day. It is a huge journey for sure, and so we all must start from somewhere. The water in the graveyard is all the emotional attachments that most people have to being unaware and thinking they are dead when they leave this place. There is no such thing as death, only staying unaware until you have the real courage to have an adventure like no other beyond what you have ever known. It is all up to you. This world is mainly based upon death, more than it is based upon a real life, as history proves this and people constantly demonstrate. As soon as one is born they are growing older. Because of how one is taught here, most people will decide to chase a dream in this world that will soon vanish, instead of exploring and discovering something wonderful to save their own life. Many continually risk their life and awareness to have a few pleasures with their ego, instead of having a much better life and awareness by paying attention to what life is showing them all the time with their own real awareness. To believe in something does sound interesting, but all that is marketed to the public to believe in only leads to death and unawareness. As in the experience of the woman just mentioned, she could not see the meaning of her experience, because she really had nothing to compare it to. From where I am standing, I can see all the psych realms, and into the real universes all the way up to the all is, so for me to see what her dream meant is simple. For her, because she is in the middle of the social structure, and has no idea how to rise above it, all she sees is the front, that has been built all around her and not all the bodies, that have been buried under the ground. Of course, this lady will go back to her so-called normal life, and do what she has always done, and as time and events pass she will soon come into the moment, when it is her time to leave this realm of experience, and what will she really know about where she is going? It is not a matter that we are to do a body count or play with the idea of being morbid here. It is simply a matter of learning to pay attention to where one is really at now. It can be a nice idea to try and make a heaven on earth for oneself, but of all those who tried, they surely did fail. Most people think in terms of years, like 10, 20, 50 or even 100 years being a really long time, but these are nothing compared to how each one of us will be around forever. All of us will always be somewhere in life, because our real awareness never ends. Only the multitude of bodies we take on eventually will fail. There are three basic areas in life for one to consider is: first, the real universes of the all is, where there is always real freedom and no darkness ever. There are no bad guys, conspiracies, cheats and liars, fake personalities, marketing play, deceptive masters and disguised reptilians, because their great universes of real light and pure sound are guarded by the real universal guides, and they will not allow anyone who has not purified their heart and being to enter. Besides, those who are ingrained with the material consciousness cannot enter anyhow. These wondrous universes are filled with magnificent light, that is brighter and more real than the sun in the sky, as there are endless possibilities for all who have established themselves there. The minuteness of the human mind can in no way even imagine, or consider the real universes of the All-Is. The second area, which many people have decided to reside in, because they do not know any better, is what is known as the gray area. All of us really live with ourselves, and so, those who have not decided to go into the higher levels of life, and are still standing in the lower ones, these individuals are, at what one would consider to be a standstill position again. Everyone has the right to choose their life accordingly, and so this is where many have decided to be for as long as they want. It is true that the two heavens of man are also in this area and a lot nicer, but these people are still unaware of themselves. The third and lowest area to reside in, which mainly deals with the authoritarians and the gods of man and the lords of karma, is the gray area. This material realm only appears as a universe. This area is the dark arena of the round worlds, such as the Earth and all the other planets and systems that exist with the light of fire from worlds on fire. Without the fire worlds there would be no light, then it would be more than obvious where the Earth is positioned, but as long as the Earth has an atmosphere, then it will appear as though there is a blue sky above. Of course, there is beauty throughout all the levels of life, and not all of them contain a real darkness like that of the material realms. The law of karma holds sway here along with the authoritarians and brutalitarians who cover the earth. They are from the original reptilian race that came to this planet and created the humanoids as slaves. Then unaware souls begin to occupy these bodies and we have what the world is today. Most of human history have been written with reptilian control, as most of the kings, queens, presidents, religious and political tyrants are reptilian and very well disguised. The general public has been utterly brainwashed for centuries as to what is really taking place here. Many people are shown in your dream visions what is real now, but most people look to the invented systems for all their answers with this life and very seldom to themselves. A person can reincarnate as many times as they wish here and stay unaware and neutral. It is all a matter of choice. The basic scenario here will always be to be born again unconscious, and then strive to survive until one is too old to endure. Most people are at the mercy of their unconscious mind, that which has many parts to it. Those reading this information may think there are books to be had to gain this information, but not so, because the real guides are able to move in the ethers of the many levels of life and gain real experience as to how the various parts of man work. Ancient scriptures are mainly about poetic sayings and moral codes to live by, which are like the nice little relationship all of us had with our parents when we were young, but as we grew too big for the pretty little sayings they gave us, we were more interested in the adventure of life. The old wisdom of the ages that so many of us have read is mainly for those who need to be told how to live their life on earth, and do not make the least bit of sense in the real universes of the All-Is. Many of the old verses and sayings do have their place as a start for some people, but if we were to stick to the age-old idea of man was not meant to fly, then where would we be now with our technology? Rebuzzer has always made it a point that a person must take the risk, and live a more dangerous life and not just dilly-dally about and be wholesome and have no purpose. Life is all about becoming more aware. Taking risks brings about experience that otherwise cannot be known. When it comes to a person's mind, most people are in agreement with what they have been told and instructed to do from others. Race car drivers and their team usually build the car from the ground up, and so they know exactly what their creation needs to succeed, yet most people will not take the time to understand the world they live on or the workings of their own being. To depend upon those who have done the most damage to this world seems to be rather immature thinking and very dangerous for all. Many people do want to know what real truth is, but all the obstacles for them to perceive real truth will show up as they pursue their endeavor, and so most will fall back for fear of not being able to succeed, or are intimidated at what they are attempting to do. This principle of opposites attracting exists in the lower realms, as a reality to all who are here. The real guides have learned to deal with the Kalam dualistic power, and are indifferent to it, but the masses and the tap line connections they have to all the negative forces makes for an upheaval when a person decides to follow the real guidance. This is why Paul gave his students several years to test what he was presenting before a person fully commits themselves, and to take on the task of meeting the many parts of themselves. The first 2 years are a runoff of as person's karma so they can better adjust to the real universes as they are being prepared to make the journey. When a person is unaware and unconscious to what this life entails, then the gods are happy, but when the real guides show up and start providing real experiences in your dream visions, then the gods are not happy and they do not want to lose any of their inmates. So, the Kalam god will use every means possible to sway a person from leaving his worlds of Maya. The rep systems are based upon fear. They also fear if people find out what they are really doing and possibly telling others, because in their minds they think they will soon have no more dumbed down followers and worshippers as support. But actually the opposite is true, because most people do not have any real courage, and so they are not ready to enter the real universes during this life. Being so, the rep systems will always have blind followers, who love to bow and kneel to them and their invented gods. Many are ready to take the journey past what their mind knows at this level, but most if not all of them, do not have the perception to recognize this fact, so when they are having real experiences in their real awareness, and as it comes through the various bodies and down to the conscious mind, of course the censor is going to alter it, or may not even let it pass at all to the person dreaming. If a person has a strong religious background, yet their heart is basically pure, they will gain experience from the higher levels in spite of the dogma they are hooked to with their mind and emotions on the earth. But, as the experience tries to unveil itself, the dark forces do not want it to happen, so they will set off an alarm in some way, like a person trying to escape from prison, and so the individual and their dream are either altered a great deal or eliminated altogether. This is where, like anything we experience in this life, it takes a real persistence to overcome our own shortcomings and conditioning that hold one back. Sometimes, it becomes even more of a challenge with not only ourselves, but those around us, as our family and friends will sometimes jump in and say they think what we are doing or planning to do does not fit any standard. What the real guides are presenting really does not fit the standards of demise most humans have invented and agreed to. An example is, a person can do all the right things, go to all the best schools, marry the most wonderful person and have beautiful children, and succeed almost perfectly with the greatest of careers. And with all of this, one would think they have reached the pinnacle of life, but the real truth is, they have only played the role and game the dualistic powers have set up for them, so they will be returning in a new body in the future, and will have forgotten once more they were ever here. This is how real this place in life is. To clarify, I am not saying just because a person chooses to stay with their one-dimensional life, that they are making the so-called wrong move, not at all. It is a fact for the most part, that social indoctrination leads most people to think they are really accomplishing something with just an outer existence alone, and that a person does not need any other mental, emotional, intuitive, and most of all, perceptive realities with their present lifestyle. Because of this narrow and ingrained one-dimensional approach, which is actually a controlling factor and part of the overall takeover from the officialness on this planet, this world is like it is today. With all the agreement to the idea that things have gotten better, and are still doing so, when actually, they are much worse and getting worse all the time. Most people want to stay asleep with all the phenomena the dark-sided certain few have established, and are constantly projecting into the minds of the masses. The world is not a bad place, but the choices each person makes will always equal what becomes evident, as all that is seen today is proof of this. Oh yes, it can be so that most people cling to the idea of hope, as most public officials have used this idea to create a snow job for the unaware to be elected by. A person can hope all they want, but there are still unseen huge choices being made here, and the end result will be what they are. My suggestion is to get real guidance now, and learn to pay attention to the real guides, and free yourself starting from the limited position of this human state. The whole of life, not just the little world humans live on, is all about becoming more aware, because the basic reality of living is survival, not just going to the movies or finding a date, and getting the best deal on a car or house one wants to buy. These are things that make up a small portion of one's activities here, but to make it the one and only lifestyle soon becomes a total waste. This is where the rep systems have marketed mankind into a constant dilemma. Everyone wants something while they are here, and so it is, as we are all partly human, but most people always go for the phenomena and not the real value. My position is even harder than those wondering if what I am presenting is real or not. Anyone can prove what I am presenting to themselves, then they will know for sure, but even then they will wonder about it, until they are very confident with their own real experiences. When I first took on the Rod of Power, the new wave, I received an email from a fellow in Alaska, a member of the Corona Corporation. He was wondering about several experiences he had with Rebazartars, where he saw Harold and Rebazar pointing to a tall blond fellow that was standing in a shaft of golden light. I personally spoke with the fellow on the phone, but as time went on he stated he was going to stay with Harold and his official position. Here is where emotional attachment becomes more than real experience. I too have attachments to things, but at the same time I let them go, as I become more aware with my own real awareness. This fellow, like many others, are given a real opportunity to take the risk and see more, but they are too afraid to leave the trap they are in, so the real guides and do little or nothing for them. I had parents and loved ones here, but when they left this realm I let them be, because they are on their own chosen journey, as I am on mine. While they were here I had attachments to them, but then broke the unnecessary ties so they could continue their own life without me interfering. My direction is with the is, and very few will have the intent to stand with the all is, as it is too much for most, and far too real that it can even exist at all. Life loves the risk-taker, and unless one is willing to go into the unknown, and have real experiences and see them, then they will stay with what they have always known, which is usually something devised by the Kalaam god and his subordinates of the earth, as many times will occur in one's dreams. The dark side is in many people's experience, where they do not notice this. A good portion of what is taking place on the earth is a lot of deception, as there are very few honorable people here. It would seem otherwise, but most people constantly accept the illusions offered others, and keep passing the same misunderstandings to their children and friends. It is not my concern what people do. I am living my real adventure with REALSIDE, Paul, Joel and all the real guides, as they are not interested in teaching those who want to pray, with and worship a headmaster and his mate that rules them. There is no way around how life already is, and it is far more than anything a person feels comfortable with on the earth alone. Each one of us can have whatever we want, but if it becomes more than what the whole of life is, then what good is it? Many times, what I am referring to will not be understood by most people reading what I am writing, because they do not have the awareness. The hidden sensor and its conditioned training are first given by a person's parents, and then from the social order and the environment one grows up in. All of these particulars forms the sensor's attitude that each person goes by. All of the do's and don'ts, right and wrongs, along with whatever else one is conditioned with, become the avenue of approach, and are set into motion in the dream arenas and the conscious mind. You have no idea how controlled you are right now. The outer life you see in front of you is a projection of your mind and senses, and is not the real world you think it is. You can decide whatever you want to, but it will not change what you have imagined to be this life until you become more aware in your real awareness. For the most part, all the particulars of a person's upbringing are along the social values set down by the parents, usually according to how the parents have been taught from their parents or social status. And so, it is not hard to see how the continued cycle of rebirth and death follow most people for hundreds of lifetimes. One attitude can haunt a person for the longest time. As each of us enter this arena of physical experience, we carry with us all the accumulation of the past and what it entails, as long as there is some form of association. For those who are fortunate to meet the real guides in this life, they will be shown and taken to wonderful worlds and universes beyond one's imagination, and never have to return here unless you want to. Because the past and even the present situations one must go through may pose so many different situations, it is best to have the real guidance as soon as possible. Those who do not know of the real guides may choose something along the lines of sensitivity training, which Paul Twitchell did not recommend it as an avenue for cure. He said it breaks down the sensor and creates confusion with the person involved. It brings about a lack of protection for the person, and leaves them at the mercy of the unconscious mind. Paul firmly went over the aspects of the psychic sciences, such as ESP and witchcraft, and so many other metaphysical paths and even so-called spiritual teachings, as they impose a real danger to people from the lower astral worlds and all the negative entities who reside there. I know a fellow in San Diego, who told me of his experiences, when he used to do astral projection. Every day after work he would come home, and go into his closet and leave his body. After a while there was a lot of strange happening around his house, that was also affecting his mate. Where he lived he was connected with a man that was very aware of the other worlds, and who was his mentor at the time, and told him what was taking place. As he was re-entering his body each time he was dragging back ruthless entities from the astral worlds, who were now in his aura. Astral projection, remote viewing and other psychic sciences are valid experiences like taking certain drugs, but a person is at the mercy of the astral influences, and especially with the reptilians who put tap lines into a person's astral body without them know it. The real guides do not project the lower four bodies of man, they work with the real you, the being of light you already is. This real position is mainly indefinable for most people, as they like their social positions more than they are interested in discovering reality. A person's aura is a protective field that all of us have around us, and when we involve ourselves in certain aspects such as drugs, smoking, low vibrational music, emotional trauma and the psych sciences, then there becomes a negative penetration and thus influences begin to occur. This is not uncommon with those who play with the psychic arts, and this includes many religions, spiritual paths and especially political associations, because in today's world there is so much deception and tap lining going on unseen. At first so much of what has been created here all looks good, just like going onto a website that looks interesting and fun, but what eventually happens is there becomes a solid connection to other areas, and then the influence starts to take place. Adolf Hitler played around with the psychic forces and self-destructed. Along with helping to create meth and giving it to all his men and himself, he finally went crazier than he was when he first had the Third Reich idea. The created world in which we have our material vehicle here is open to numerous effects that the conscious mind cannot sense, and many times are taken for granted. Being the risk taker involves doing what you normally do not do to find out what you normally would not discover. With real guidance one can be given real experiences, and learn to bypass the conditioning effects from the past and present, and live a much better life and also attain real freedom now. This is a huge journey. I work with all types of individuals with my all-humanitarian projects. Some of them are seers, and I like to hear what they see about what I am doing. I have introduced them to Rebelzer, Paul and Yul, the boys, and they have come right into these people's awareness as they introduced themselves. As I would talk with them they relay what Rebelzer or Paul are saying, or confirm a real vivid experience I had. I do this to meet others who are open to becoming more aware, and then I have NUF friends to work with here. I always listen and learn, as I hear what others have to say, because they have their views and it is fun. My friend Miss K, who is a seer, is the one who saw the 5 waves, which I wrote about in the Adventures of Rebelzer Tars, when I was going through my ordeals from 2003 to 2006. I would call Miss K all the time, as I had lost my confidence for a while, and she would tell me the boys were helping me get back on track. Paul told her I should have died from the wave I saw in my dream visions, because I was really knocked for a loop, and for years. When she wasn't around I would talk to others I knew. One of the gals was an American who lived in Puerto Rico. When I got to know her better I asked her one day how she saw me. She said she saw me as a shaft of light, and the impression came to her of Messiah. What she was really seeing was the rod of power and the new man of the future. Her terminology was her own according to what she knew. I respect a person that has mastered their abilities, and is into the adventure of life. Most of the psychics that work the field mainly stay with the personal areas of human love and relationships, and so their awareness is mainly of the astral realms and basically no further. To them spiritual means something that is good, and has to do with the God, and so here again is the confirmation of where the idea of spiritual lies for most. I am presenting a real education concerning the various levels of life, beyond the limited concepts of the social order and the invented gods of man, and to do so I must provide an endless amount of comparisons for everyone to possibly finally get a small portion of what I am providing. Some who do dream interpretation usually see the surface meaning or medical approach, and the psychic analysis. For the most part, a lot of dead imagery can be involved, as I gave the example earlier of the woman in the watery graveyard. The average person might interpret it as possibly her visiting her relatives, or that she may be going there soon, and a host of other one-dimensional views, which can also be valid, as there are many sides to anything. If a person just looks at the pieces instead of the whole, then they will get a valid interpretation, but not the completeness with what life is. When one has the ability to perceive from the real awareness, then they can see the overall situation and they are not limited to just the pieces. I know that most will disagree with my view, because they lack real experience, even though they may be highly educated. For most, their education is from this one-dimensional level only. This is where the real guides are not concerned about the opinions and attitudes of educated humans, because they know exactly how humans have been indoctrinated with belief and superstition, even though from the personal view they will band together and form agreements to what works for them, as it all looks so good from the personal self. All that is said and done here will soon go through its own transformation and changes, unless a person has real guidance with the real guides. I would say, parenting is one of the hardest jobs a person can do, and over the years I have really learned and gained a lot of respect for the moms who take the most time with their children and are there for them 24/7. Everyone wants the best for their child, and with the way the world is today, it truly is a lot harder to raise children and keep them in line for their own safety. I really do respect those people that have chosen homeschooling for their children, as an example, because the rep systems do not like people to be independent of their control and brainwashing for the militarized social orders. This may sound a little harsh, but it is very true as to what is really taking place now. Everyone should have a choice to their life, and not be fear-driven and intimidated into doing otherwise, or they are in a psychic trap they may not get out of. I have met homeschooled children and they are very open and aware, and they do not hang around with nothing to do like the normally educated sometimes do. I know of a couple that have a daughter, and how she was raised according to the basic standards, but what happened as time went on and the daughter became older, the mother smothered her with whatever she wanted, and so it set into motion her pleasure principle of being dependent and having a lot of negative hang-ups. The daughter is now 30 years old, and she is still working through all the me attitudes that were allowed to flourish. This is a common scenario and is neither right or wrong, but that of choices made from all sides of those concerned. All of us usually do grow out of the rather one-sided spots of self-interest only, except for those who become politicians. Certain types of people never grow up, even though they play a good role to the public and are very convincing. The complex dream which most people have has two basic parts, which are the surface meaning and the hidden meaning. This is where the real truth lies unseen like a shadow in the night. Because the real guides who they are, they have a super in-depth perception of all the levels of life and see what is taking place from the real side, way more so than what any human can consider. This is the reason the beings of the Is work in the background, as what they are providing is far too much for humans to comprehend. I had a REALSIDE experience with my daughter recently, where I was sitting in a chair right behind where she was sitting. I sat silently and just watched as she was talking with others. Then at some point she turned and said, "You have done more for me, Dad, than anyone." Then she stood up and came and sat next to me as I put my arm around her. Then she asked me what she should do with her life now. I replied, "Just live your life, and take some walks once in a while and enjoy your surroundings, and watch as nature plays." It was a heartwarming experience for me, because my daughter does like her attitudes. The real guides not only see the aura of a person and what needs adjustment, but they work directly with the real awareness of the individual to grant them experiences in the higher levels that cannot be had here. The real guides and their fun educational techniques far surpass that of even the greatest of universities on the earth. When a dream is looked at, unless it is very straightforward, it may be evaluated for its least value, because most people do not know what real value is. The great adventure of life is to explore what very few will, because those who do will always come through as a winner. Animals and primitive people basically have no censor for them to deal with in their dream visions. The reason for this is how they have been raised, so they basically have no conscience. The old saying of "let your conscience be your guide" can be a haphazard idea. If a person has been trained to kill everything in sight, then their conscience would be devastatingly brutal. And so again, what society deems to be so endearing is sometimes a lot of adult silliness as usual. Any sense of moral laws and obligations, as with all the social orders, does not exist for animals and primitive people. And so, it only makes sense they have not developed any moral principle within themselves. As such, their dream visions will come to them more in a straightforward fashion, while they have a body here. If one were to investigate the survival tactics of the primitive person, they would see and recognize they are on a higher survival scale than any civilized person. These people use their intuitive nature, as opposed to their developed intellect. If Dr. Fell were put in the wilderness, I wonder how well he would do, as he tried to intellectually communicate with his intellectual mind and nature and also the animals and how they live. I'm sure he would probably try and talk them out of their way of living into a situation somewhere in the city limits. There was a time when humans were able to communicate with nature, and what we have come to know as the nature spirits Tinker Bell and Peter Pan are far from any truth of today, but in their time, they were around for those who were trusted by the fairy people. Because of how humans have proven themselves to be, the nature beings are in no way interested in most adults, but they will come to some children. Real life, not what is seen here, as we view the created outer surface of circumstances, has the greatest potential of all for each of us. It is a clean and clear endlessness of wondrous possibilities, as this is the real universes and not this physical scene. This is something that can only be seen when a person becomes more aware. But then again, if a person wants to stay cool with the times, they for sure will be satisfied with their human life only. The human ego and the will it has, no matter what, always ends up in the same spot. The restrictive laws and commandments that have been written about and so miraculously created by the stroke of a pen, divine intervention, or the connivingness of the small and minute minds of man, have flabbergasted the onlooking public for centuries. The rules and regulations of the authoritarians have become such that many people have become obsessed over what others have created, as they have made themselves into hardened rule lovers. The rep systems are the best example of hardened rule lovers, as they continually manufacture their clever little laws to purposely suppress people into an intimidating submission. They make the rules and laws, and then keep a steadfast eye for those who will for sure break them. The policeman behind the billboard is a scene we have all experienced. All rules, regulations, commandments, the legal system and so on, are contrived under the direction of the gods of man, and their dumbed-down subordinates on the earth. The rule makers and their inadequate formula for control is based upon a justification of the out-of-control ego and the pleasure principle. Because most humans like to act out their stupidity more so than they like being more aware, the rep systems are having the time of their lives, always thinking up new ways to control people. This is all purposely done, even though it is presented in a way to seem necessary for the public to accept as something real. The funny thing is, most people do wholeheartedly agree to all the rhetoric ruling loving nonsense. Not only do the taxpayers pay the rep systems and their salaries, people are also fined by these same people. With all the intermingling of ideas and emotions, it is not hard to see why reincarnation is a way of life here. For the most part, man's experience here becomes a constant warfare with his own censor, as the rep systems have laid down all the shall nots to all who will listen. Many want to believe what their belief system has told them is true, and that their appointed savior died for them so they could be saved from themselves. This has been a huge angle of marketing ploy by the certain few and their invented systems, to get people to support their takeover. Jesus was simply doing a presentation, as an example, when he gave his Sermon on the Mount and his other adventures here. He became a competitive threat to the belief system of his times, and was purposely set up and taken down by the same system, that today exalts him as their savior. He wrote nothing, advocated nothing, yet today, we have a huge conglomeration of ideas and writings, which he had nothing to do with. What this world is experiencing is marketing ploy at its finest. I am sure it is, so that many people would seem to think they really do need a belief system to look to, but the opposite is true, because of what the intent of the existing systems are really based upon. Here again, is where a person's dream visions will prove what is taking place with those who influence and control the majority of people. Each person has the free will to choose what their life will be, even in desperation, the choice is always theirs to have. The rep systems have used the brutality of the few to harness all the qualities of the many. The courtrooms are full of the unlawful, who now seem to have more rights than the honest working citizen. The answer is so simple and right in front of us all. The courts, police, the United States and all agencies are private corporations and doing business. The ethics of modern living has been washed away for a lifestyle of conquering those who are easy targets, and to get what they have worked hard for. Years ago, I was in a private placement, which I had invested in. As the company began to make a lot of money, one of the well-known government agencies came in and shut the operations down, and put a receiver over all the transactions and profits. Instead of assisting, the receiver began to sell off the properties, because he knew it would take time to do so, as he was being paid approximately $250 an hour, every day, along with his close friends and associates. I actually obtained a huge loan to pay back the original investors, and this action was proposed twice, but the receiver, in front of the shareholders, lied to them, and said there was no offers made. To this day, the receiver is still milking the remainder of the funds until they are all gone. Here is an example of a totally distorted rule lover and conniver, who purposely took advantage of others, and used the system to do it. His karmic debt will be huge, as Rebelzer and Paul have already shown me. His approximate lifetimes to pay everyone back, and that's if he sticks to doing it, at least 25 lifetimes of not so happy of an experience or memories. So much for the legal system, that has taught its people to stay unaware and dumbed down. I am always like a kid at heart, with what I know and especially who I know. The money will come and go, but the greatest love and assurance is with me always, the real gods and the all is. My experience, as I am writing this book, is with Paul and Rebels are guiding me along, as they make their funny little appearances. When I am pressing on the computer keys, I see Paul's light radiating, as I bring about an idea to express. Rebelzer stands nearby to remind me of an experience we have had together, that relates to what I am writing. I usually write for several hours and then go ride my bike along the beach and consider what I will be writing next. Each new book I have written gets better than the last one. It is a great privilege and honor to be able to dedicate my entire life to presenting all that I have learned. I get all my inspiration directly from the is. All I see are universes of light and the real guides standing with me in the most secret of positions. The unknown level of the all is very few will ever perceive and see the true reality life is, until they have the heart to do so. It really does take a huge focus with an adventure like no other to see what most people never will. The sensor must, you might say, obey what it has been instructed to do, and so the unconscious mind, which can be a connection to the Kalam God and his subordinates or the real guidance of the universal guides, whichever, will try to sneak across the experience and information, or even disguise it to contact the conscious mind. Because the conditioning of the conscious mind is such, it will for the most part not pay any attention to what is being relayed, as it is mainly mechanical in nature. This is why the rep systems do not teach about dreams and visions, nor accept them as anything of being valid, because when people discover their real abilities, they no longer need to fear, or be intimidated ever again by the small minds, who have made all the rules to be condemned by. As we look upon this world, we can easily see there are so many man-made restrictions that we do not experience in nature. All of what is taking place with the fake officialness of things here has become an agreeable standard for most people to live by. By doing so, most people are also agreeing to returning here unconsciously, and struggling for more lifetimes of an even worse and more poisoned and polluted future with their bodies. The programmed sensor has committed itself to certain obligations from its training, such as love and honor as ideas. And as an example, if two people, who are together have bitter quarrels, and upsetting arguments, they may have dreams of one killing the other one, because the imagination can run like a wild beast, and conjure up all kinds of things, which affects the unconscious mind, and so with the moral obligation of the sensor being what it is, it will not let the experience come through to the personal self. And so as the sensor cleverly distorts the information from the subconscious, as the personal self is left unknowing what really took place from their own actions, because most people are not at all objective about seeing themselves. It is not really about the drama that each of us have to deal with. But the important part is the understanding of how the actions of our personal will, mind and imagination work and then show us the results. This is cause and effect in action. This is where the real secret lies, which is not understood on the surface, and so therapy proposed by the experts is sometimes a waste of time, because they really do not know what is taking place in the individual from their real awareness, which they have no idea exists at all. A person's dream visions make up a great portion of one's life, and are very important and should be continuously looked at, even though this is not openly taught. The Indians were great observers of their dreams, and they would judge a person by the dreams one had. When I was an Indian in past lives, our dream visions always meant so much, because there were no schools to be educated by except the one each of us carry with us and nature that is all around. There was always plenty of time to discuss our dreams and visions. Rebels and the other real guides were with me in the past, while I was being trained for what I am doing now. In New Book 1, From Then to Now, I tell of the experiences I had before this life. Paul did the same with a book he wrote where he was a scout. The early days of this nation were a lot simpler and more natural. During my past life, Rebels showed me some of the future I am in now, which I didn't understand then, because I had no comparisons for what is now. The mechanism of dreams usually uses exaggerated absurd actions and demonstrations to make a point and provide a lesson. Something very exaggerated to get our attention, even if it is scary. The real guides do this all the time to me, but what is really taking place is the language from the other levels, which is not always the same as here. It is like going to another country where people speak their own tongue, as the new onlooker tries to understand. One cannot expect the higher levels of life to be just like here, or we would surely be in trouble. There is a great refinement to the different levels beyond the physical realm, and so anyone who wants to experience the various heavens and real universes must first be prepared to meet with the situations they will encounter. The rep systems use the idea of good and bad. If a person is good, according to the officialness, and has their blessings, then things look very promising, as they may be going to their appointed heaven. But if the person is bad according to those who rule, then the situation does not look good at all, and it would seem the person will be going to their supposed hell. What if a person wants nothing to do with the intimidation and cruelty of the church, and just lives their life according to their natural surroundings? Here again you have human judgment of those who want to control others, deciding that if a person is not a believer in a certain system, then they are condemned, which is a fallacy. As one enters the real universes, which are far beyond time and space, and experiences the true reality life is, they will discover for themselves what is taking place on the earth and all the other round worlds of illusion. The good and bad ideas are the two options mostly people think is all they have to go by, because of the judgmental way the belief systems weave their will upon people. Even they will not fess up to what their own scriptures say about the many mentions, which are actually references to the various levels of life beyond this life. Not one heaven, but many different heavens, which are not controlled by any system or agency of the earth. But of course, they have no real experience, so they can never answer the question of what is real. A society has flourished, and we have all come into this present time of events, so has the stress of what has been created. Today, like never before, is the big deal making and what it entails. With the internet and all its uses we now have, it is a new world to explore and utilize, but the internet is mechanically driven and can vanish in the twinkling of an eye, if the power supply goes off. With our fast-paced lifestyle and the do-it-now attitude, society continues to drive itself ever so much faster, to get into the next thrill. By doing so, tempers flare and mount with a lot of unnecessary misunderstanding, along with many misconceptions that appear, because people are driven to rapidly get ahead to actually nowhere. Everything that is taking place here is a passing dream and nothing more. Until you be now and be real, you will not see the true reality life is. The idea of getting ahead is of a particular nature, which is marketing ploy to keep people oblivious to what the world controllers are doing with all their takeovers on a daily basis. There are many ways to approach this, as a person wants to survive the best they can here. When the getting ahead means something, as an example, for the place a person is working at, many times this is where the person is actually part of the takeover. This is what many government agencies do to their hired people. They drive them with the ideas of loyalty and patriotism to the supposed cause of protecting the country they are in, when in fact, a person becomes part of the hidden agenda of those in control. Each of us is a unique individual. This is real. When one finally gets to the top of the mountain of life, they can now see what has been going on all along, while a part of themselves, the indoctrinated mind and emotions, was caught up with all that had been created to look justifiable and reasonable. This is why reason and logic have no place in real life, because these created ideas only seem to work with all the phenomena that has been put into place here, but only for a short span, then they take their place with the dust they came from. Any type of lifestyle can be created in the lower realms. The American Indians, and most of the earthly primitive people, those who are labeled as third world countries and cultures, had proven this for the longest time. Here is where the idea of others being of a savage nature becomes a huge prejudice, as the American Indians have experienced in this country, and later on, the African Americans. The world controllers have purposely driven a distorted physiological prejudice into the emotional and subconscious bodies of the masses, as this then becomes a part of getting others to cooperate with their takeovers. Each one of us can decide whatever we want to, and change our way of thinking and the interpretation of what we have been conditioned with, but for many, this then becomes scary and unacceptable to others. This is the same situation the real gods have to contend with all the time with people, as they provide something wonderful, yet when a person is so lodged into their social behavior, they are afraid to explore beyond the boundaries they have always accepted and set for themselves. I constantly get emails from people who are so locked into their literal senses that they can only quote what someone has written, even without them having any real experiences on their own. Written and spoken words are merely a reference to something, not always a true fact or a real experience. The world of humans has become so much more judgmental than realistic. I am constantly judged by what I write and say, which is fine, but the reality of saying and writing something does not always give a proper explanation of what is being presented. From all that I am writing and telling others, the basic and bottom line is, I am providing real guidance with something wonderful, but you must learn to recognize it more so than analyzing it, and trying to figure it out with the literal senses. Each person who takes the time to really listen, and first of all experiment with themselves when it comes to the new sessions, then contacts Rebels or TARS and the real guides on the REALSIDE, they will begin to have real experiences in their dream visions. Then, it is up to each person to decide if they will accept what is being shown and demonstrated to them, or to stay with what they have always known, their conditioned mind and sensor, which is usually wrapped with a pleasure principle. This is the complete unconscious lie for most people, who agree with their lower 5 bodies only. If they decide to stay with their conditioning, then they will have to follow out their basic karmic future pattern, which they have, for the most part, unknowingly created from many lifetimes. When a person decides to listen to real guidance, their karmic burden starts to work off a lot faster. From all that I am writing, this is the main focus, otherwise, I am only providing a lot of words like anyone else. Part of the real guidance is to let the created part of the individual know what is possible, which is the personal self, then they can decide whether they want to proceed or not. The real experiences in one's dream visions, which the real guides always demonstrate, are to get a person going with their own journey to real freedom, and out of all the drama and karmic misunderstanding of being unconscious to the true reality life is, the all is. The majority of humans see themselves as superior to all the other so-called creatures who exist here, yet it is the humans who are destroying the natural environment and not the supposed lowly creatures who do not live in big houses, and do not do all the big deals and market themselves as something they are not. And so for most people, their dream experiences will be of a rather radical nature, and to the extremes of having visions of killing others and also that of wild beasts. There are many examples of annihilation that one can experience, and when they are seen for what they are, they bring about a realization of benefit once properly understood, if the person involved will take the time to listen and learn. Even a man in prison can realize what he has done and begin to correct his attitude, as one does not have to go through more lifetimes of drudgery to change. Learning to be now, and discover the real guidance turns the tides with one's life, too, where they are open to the sound light reality, that expands their real awareness and they become more aware. The unconscious mind with all that it entails is like a pack of wild beasts at times. It is a seemingly endless arena of imaginable and unimaginable ideas, assumptions, notions, loves, desires, hates, and whatever else can be conjured up. A man can see a beautiful woman and immediately want her. His desire is in the category of lust, and all the images he suddenly produces within himself motivates him to decide a direction and then to accomplish his goal. Because of the social setting he is in, he knows he must go about the process with some dignity and his approach must appear to be sincere. If, after all, the attempts to persuade the woman into his life do not work, then the man may go to other extremes, such as intimidation and even rape. Again, this is an example of the formulated ideas in the subconscious mind that can run wild and out of control. Society breeds the influence I continually refer to, as most women want to be desired and sought after, but then again they have their own idea of how they want it to be done. To most, it would seem that what one is creating within themselves is a natural process, but it is actually the imaginary creativeness of one that is rather out of control. Just like a person driving down the street, as they stay within the lanes, as opposed to weaving all about and causing havoc for themselves and others. All of us are here to experience a particular process and learn about ourselves, the real you, and then from this we are to finally realize what is not real, then to eventually recognize and perceive what is real. What I am providing surpasses so much that can be understood by most, yet it is really very minuscule compared to the great awareness that can be accomplished with real guidance into reality. There are basic desires and needs, while we are here and having to maintain a physical body. The first, of course, is food, something to keep us going and to satisfy the lower nature of ourself. Then comes love, or what we understand individually to be love. This is actually the personal love, that is mainly emotions with all kinds of ideas attached. Personal love is not the ultimate like so many people think it is. For the most part it becomes a lot of drama for lifetimes, and keeps a person dumbed down and unaware. This is why the love idea is used so much by the religious orders, because it is a huge control factor. Of course, personal love has its place, but there is so much more with the whole of life that personal love cannot reach. With all that is taking place right now, there are many looking for the fulfillment of what they deem to be love. The basic idea is two people getting along and sharing their life together, and possibly having children, which supposedly bonds the union even more so. Then, there are the other family members, who hang around and have not found a mate, or those who have lost their mate to the departure of the physical vehicle. Real love, not the emotional attachment and idea and feelings of the human being, but the overall reality, that usually goes about unnoticed, is actually the love everyone is looking for. What we as humans experience here is a lesser version and an extension of real love. Real love is real freedom, like the sun in the sky, shining as it shines upon all and asks for nothing. But, to truly understand this great position, one must gain the right experiences, to have it for themselves. And so, because humans have the encumbrance of adult vision and perception here, they go for what they feel is the only way to accomplish what they are looking for, and that is with another person. There is nothing wrong with taking on anything here, but to be stuck here because of what we have to deal with does not make the least bit of sense. The earth and all that it entails is a place in life and not the true reality or the real universes. The old saying of love is blind is true, and the reference is that of human emotional love. Today more than ever, so much of what people are being taught and marketed is more desire than love or a real commitment to anything of real value. It would seem to me, As I watch people go about their daily affairs, they truly are in love, mainly with their cell phones. No wonder the blow-up dummy market is at an all-time high. There is a reverence when two people simply accept each other and are comfortable about themselves, and as the sun shines, so can each one of us with a much better understanding than human history. Because humans are what they are, a person cannot repress their desire for personal love, and live a life of repression, because this becomes something to deal with which is not necessary. So, to better understand the love urge, one must learn to create a balance within themselves through their experiences with their life. All of us are connected to the qualities of the true reality life is, which are purity, humility, sincerity, gratitude, and the persistent journey to become more aware and realize ourselves as radiant beings of light of the highest order. As long as a person continues to see and accept they are human only, then it is in the human arena they will stay. To help assist us on our journey to real freedom, the All has provided each of us with an imagination. With this wonderful ability we can learn to surpass the conditioned mind and those who rule the unaware, and eventually be wherever we want to be. Our imagination is a connection to the subtle fluid worlds and universes, which are always unseen by the physical eyes. By gaining real experiences in your dream visions with the levels of life, we then experience real love, the love each person is really seeking to satisfy themselves with. In the human arena, most people are really infants when it comes to understanding themselves and the feelings they can produce. Most will go wild with their emotions and land on their face until they figure out what they are doing to themselves. Many of the reality shows reveal the immaturity of people as they display themselves in various situations, which are really premeditated for them to react and look silly, because the audience, who is also immature, is looking to see some form of sensationalism. When the star or any such show is having multitudes of the opposite sex go for the one main attraction, this is definitely not love, but a circus act to try and get a relationship going. With so many choices right at a person's feet, how can they really choose? And here again, you have modern society with all their new toys, and they want to play, while the planet is dissolving, as there will always be those who have nothing better to do than be silly. Like the old song, looking for love in all the wrong places, humans are just being their basic silly selves. Real love is real freedom from the old drama, and being creative with something of a real benefit. Reality and all that it entails is so much better than what can be accomplished here, yet most people will constantly take second best, which is more lifetimes of the same routine and drama. One of the reasons people act the way they do with all the odd routines they go through is because they have been educated by the rep systems into a considered conformity, which is very prevalent and suppressed in the unconscious mind, and shows up in the conscious mind with the actions a person decides. An excellent example is a well-known politician most people know of. He was raised in a well-to-do family that projected to the world their so-called properness, which is more of a front than anything else. And with all he was given and had access to, he was still an outright goofball. Why? Because, just like all of us, he didn't like the restrictions that were put upon him as to how he should be and act. It is sad to say this fellow only puts on a front to the viewing public, as he is with the dark certain few, as him and his political buddies have caused so much of the brutal destruction on the earth. The outer controlling systems, with all they imply, are very seldom what they show the public with their put-on benevolent fronts. Each one of us really wants real freedom, from the most religious and well-meaning person to the lowest and evilest of creatures, but very few know how to go about getting it. So, after constantly being reprimanded by his father about his actions, This political brat set out to take a risk, and that was to eventually run for the highest office in the nation. Lo and behold, he made it, because the majority of the public is unaware and buys whatever the politicians tell them. The race was very close, so along with a few little tricks, he and his gangster buddies made sure the votes went to him. I can read the universal files, so I can see what really took place. Anyhow, the idea here is that he reached for what he thought was the top of life, from his limited human view, and took on the appearance of accomplishing it. Now that he was in office, he could basically do whatever he wanted, and also finally got the approval of his father, which he so dearly wanted. Again, this is where love is blind, as the love he was looking for was not really there, only a pat on the back, so to speak, from his father, who is one with those who control the world from the shadows. Because most of the politicians belong to secret societies, he was given full rein to do all the stupid antics he wanted, but the idea was to make them look presentable and acceptable to the public. This politician is just like all those before him and all those after him. All of them will meet the angels of death from the astral worlds and deal with the lords of karma, who definitely do not care about earthly titles, as they will sentence him to a lot of future lifetimes of untold drudgery, for what he has chosen to do at this time on the earth. I am not into pointing the finger at anyone, so to speak, as I am providing real examples of the physiological evidence of this world today. It is the sign of the times as we are now in, and that is there is so much blatant stupidity and brutal secret sorcery nonsense going on with all the marketing ploy the rep systems are into. There is an invisible overall censor on everyone from the world-controlling brats, which the public is not aware of, nor are they interested in investigating what is really taking place. Some people already know this, and many are too afraid to see it for what it is. There is an undermining force everywhere the public does not see that controls the rep systems, as mostly people only see the puppets of the puppeteers, who are they themselves controlled by the influence, the third head of the Kaloam god. All of this does get into other worlds of sinistrism. The rep systems have their own secret forces of dark psychics and remote viewers they use, along with technology most of the public can only imagine. When one of their kind is about to be exposed, they even help it along, to make them an example, to continue the fear idea to everyone. As long as you can keep your cool, like in the mafia, you are okay, but if you slip up, then you become the example and the sacrifice. All those who play with the dualistic forces soon pay the price, because everyone has to deal with cause and effect karma, while they have their 5 bodies here. On the current money are some of the symbols of the secret societies. It's their way of showing off and displaying who is boss, but all these people that played their games of control will be returning in deformed bodies, and having to deal with it. Only the new man and the real universal guides can offset the karmic debts of those silly enough to think they can outdo life itself. What I am referring to here is not the whole of life, the all is, but the created psychic bubble that we know as creation, which most people think is. What life is creation is a process we are each going through until we can recognize real freedom and stand in it. I know I am putting myself at risk here by providing this information, and the reason is, I am providing an opportunity to see if these misguided souls will wise up, and do something about all the nonsense they have created, and are planning still to do. I know everything they are doing and planning to do, and as time and events go along they are digging themselves a bigger and bigger hole to climb out of, if they ever can. In this society, basically from birth, we are taught to go after something other than the recognition of why we are here and who we really are. Society breeds the constant disease of ignorance and unawareness, And so it is not surprising to find there are more lawyers, psychiatrists, politicians and religious fanatics, spiritual masters, and so many other types of businesses that are destroying the natural environment than there are people with common sense. Of all these so-called official social geniuses, how many of them understand themselves and their dream visions, and have had real experiences with the real guides? And with what these people are doing and performing, is it really something which will alleviate the karmic burdens of themselves and others too, where they can see the real light? It is so obvious that even the great minds of our time do not at all heed human history, yet they do refer to it, but never in its true sense. To them, having blown something up and conquering others seems to be the big deal, like the white man did to the Indians. The world is a show for the human ego, to plunge itself into death and destruction in the name of national security, patriotism, human survival and whatever the rigid and arrogant can magically create to fool others with. It is time for real truth, not the padded nonsense and cruelty that has always been delivered by the rep systems and their marketing media. When a person has the awareness of the real universes, they can see far beyond all the limitations, hate, destruction and darkness this place manufactures. So, I would strongly suggest to start paying attention to your dream visions, and do the New You sessions immediately. The real guides are ready right now, to assist you with the true reality. With society as it is, many people have anxiety dreams, from what they put themselves through in the workplace and with their relationships. The business of today, many times forces its workers to frantically get the job done at all costs. Which means that it will cost those involved, as they emotionally stress for their survival. For some reason, most people keep thinking in the terms that what they are experiencing here is how life is, but what has been created here is what life isn't. Many times people are going, though what they have actually put themselves in from the past, which are similar situations from past lives. Because the unconscious likes to continually experience what it has come to know, it will take second best with the pleasure principle, if it cannot get what it really wants. What I am laying out here is how all the unaware humans of the earth are actually out of control, as they are controlled by their desires and likes and dislikes and not any real sensibility. As long as a person continues with their so-called normal life, they will be at the mercy of their subconscious mind and all it desires, and with this routine the influence has a field day. The standard life only entails more karma and reincarnation. All those spooky movies about past lives and huntings from the psych realms are very true, and a lot of people do experience them, because they have opened themselves up to the negative forces, and do not know how to plug the holes. Only the real guides can ward off the offenders. Those funny guys with crosses around their necks and the hocus-pocus smoking pots will not really do anything. Most religions are already part of the mishaps in people's lives and dreams. Someone I have known for many years, who used to attend my classes, lives here in Southern California, and for the most part is a sensible person, except when it comes to her emotional life, she has always hit the wall, so to speak. Well, this young gallant has been a heavy drinker for the longest time, and also hooked herself to some psychic endeavors along with her strange family relationships. So, it is not hard to see why she opened the hole in the psych forces that was actually a type of doorway, like in the first Ghostbuster movie the portal was in her bedroom, and several other people I was teaching years ago experienced the gruesome entity that emerged from the opening. One fellow who was in my class actually wrestled with it late one night, when he heard it coming into his house. This was not even a dream, but an actual physical encounter. Society does not understand the real and awful negative forces many are into. The radical so-called music of today, which is not really music, but bad vibrations, connects one to the lowest of the astral worlds along with excessive alcohol and drugs, where all the demons reside, and are constantly looking for a way to get it and influence others, and also destroy the humans. Many of these lost souls in the bowels of what the church calls their hell, were once people like anyone else, until they began to do dastardly deeds, and align themselves with the lowest of influences. This is why I am so blatant about what I am presenting. I am actually trying to warn everyone, even the imbeciles, who are always wanting to take complete control of the world and everyone on it. Many of them will end up in the lower astral hells, and will be waking up to a constant nightmare for the longest time. The astral hells are not eternal like the church wants their followers to believe, as they use the eternal damnation ploy, because they want to scare people into being supportive and not wander about and give their time and money to someone else. This is why there are so many different rituals and ceremonies with the religious orders. The unaware masses have been seduced by the original reptilians to accept religious rites and beliefs as a way of life. Most people like to cling to certain emotional ideas, and the basis for most religions has been some kind of savior or saint dying, which then becomes a martyr, that the belief systems use to control the emotional senses of those who do not understand how creation works. The dark brats do not understand either, but they put on the act with their officialness, that they do know everything, and that they have direct communication to the unseen deities they have everyone blindly pray to. All of this and whatever else has been created here appears and feels so reasonable, and it is more than evident that most people like what is taking place, even though it is keeping them unconscious as to who they really are. The old idea that the gods created each person, their human body, and that they are in control of everything is a fallacy. As anyone can see for themselves, the human body is created in the womb of a woman, and this can only be so because the real awareness each one of us is actually creates the body with the help of another person, as a vehicle to gain experience here. Even when the evidence of what is really taking place is right in front of everyone, they will still usually accept the marketing ploy of others and many times pay a lot for it. This shows how fragile the human person can be, as all life does make sense once you see it and be real with it. The movies and music of today many times plays to the negative emotions of people for their support and their money in some way. If you have been paying attention to what I have written so far, then you will see how the pleasure principle is working in people's lives almost without their consent. The pleasure principle is the basic nature of humans, and the marketing manipulators figured this out a long time ago when it all started with the first prostitute, as an example. Today, people do themselves over with raunchy music, video games, cell phones stuck to their heads, and mainly being bored, because they have no real purpose, challenge or real adventure in their lives. All they really have is a seemingly endless array of phenomena to get lost in. It is not my position to say what a person should or shouldn't do, but there is so much more to life, but it takes a lot of real effort to make it happen. The earth life is simply a dimension all its own, among other dimensions, seen and unseen. Each basic level of life has many regions, states of consciousness, and vast multitudes of personal arenas any of us can experience. The basic principle of life is simple: simply pick your position. It is in the same sense as one would choose their career, even though a person is still doing all the other things that entail their life, such as raising a family, playing sports and taking trips for fun and pleasure. But the center of operations is the career one has chosen, because it supports everything else. And so it is with a real universal position, as it gives a person the absolute freedom to do whatever and be anywhere without restriction, as long as they do not interfere with anything else. The human awareness, which entails the pleasure principle, usually does not want to confront itself, and so much of the worthlessness it puts itself through, so instead it creates agreements that look really good to the onlooking unaware, and voila, you have a whole gamut of institutionalized productions to the general public, and whatever else can be invented to entice the minds of the unsuspecting to get their money and support. I would recommend learning about the various levels of life and how they apply to a person's life, then one will see and learn so much more, and actually start to move into the higher areas and experience what very few ever do. So much of what is experienced today is from the creation of desires from past lives. When this country was being built, a lot of people lost their lives early, and so the desire to complete what they started still exists within them. But, as time and events continue on at the fast pace they do, so does the desire to continually do more until one finds a better replacement for what is on the earth alone. Life makes sense, and it is a lot more fun to understand what is already taking place, as opposed to all the created ideas that are usually silly stories to entice people into becoming a donor for something that leads them astray. When we center on really learning about ourselves with real guidance, our life changes the way we want it to, and not according to so many of the good-sounding ideas that are merely words for sale. If you take a close look and observe keenly at what has been and is being presented by so many know-it-alls in the professional fields, you will soon notice that what is being given to people is actually telling them what to do with their life. In other words, the masses are purposely being directed to obey the good-sounding ideas of those who are professing to help them with their lives, when actually they are subtly ordering people to obey and get in line or else. It has become such a standard for people to be told what to do with themselves. Most people want to resist, but at the same time they do not want to be left alone, and possibly be the only rebel for their personal choice and freedom, so they follow the herd and obey. All of this is fine, because each person has the right to do whatever they want to. The political and religious rulers are very good at doing this, as they make their pretty speeches in such a way that it all sounds so good, even though what they are saying means basically nothing. They always make it sound like they are doing you a favor, when in fact it has been your labor that pays them to tell you what to do. Did they build the buildings they work in? Do they maintain them? Did they build the facilities that print the fake money they make people use to create all the deficits they created, and make you think it was you? Are you sure you want to keep doing the same routine with those who really do not care at all about you? You always have the choice to do better, but you must be the real risk taker, and decide to have real guidance and test the new sessions. The all-is works with those who want to recognize what it is. Only with the all-is is there real freedom. A freedom so wonderful, you cannot even imagine it from your human mind. It would seem impossible, and those who control the political, religious and spiritual systems will tell you there is no such thing, with what Dwayne the great writer is presenting. So, you can always stay with the controlling gods of man and the ruling authoritarians of the earth world, with all their rules, regulations and fear, or try the new sessions and watch your dream visions.
No, 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 yo 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 no yo 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 no yo 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 ஆதிமூலநாத ஜோதி ஓதும் ஓதும் ஜீவபோதி ஈடில்லாத ஞான சேதி ஊன்றி வாசினேசி பூசி நாதவிந்து கலாதி நமோ நம 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 நாதவிந்து கலாதி நமோ நம